I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to begin with a moment of silence, please. Roll call. I'll start with newly elected Commissioner Stiebens.
Here.
Commissioner Smith is present. Commissioner Culbertson.
Here.
Commissioner KAAZ.
Here.
All right. And Commissioner Shimke will join us in a few minutes. So, on public comment, we have anyone scheduled for public comment on an agenda item? Mr. Irvin. We have 3 minutes for public comment. Just place them right there.
You can put them on the table right there.
For the record, Commissioner Shimke is now present. How are you today?
I'm good. Good morning.
Go ahead.
My apologies.
My name is Ed Irvin. I live at 13561 246th Street. Prior to October of 2019, I had not had any problem with the holes. When I first called in to complain about the whole compound on November 2019, I was told that I was the 5th person to call in to complain about this property. My wife and I also paid $300 to start an SUP on February 13th of 2020. We were told that we need to place all activities occurring on our property on the narrative as part of our SUP. Due to the COVID-19, we decided to put our application on hold. Not all activities occurring at the Loring SUP address are listed on the current SUP. This is very concerning. There's excessive junk, abandoned vehicles on the property. This is a fact. There's a salvage operation occurring on the property. This is a fact. There's an MS racetrack on the property that is not shown on a 2018 satellite image. All the activities are tied and associated in some way to the crane rental business. A salvage operation is considered industrial and would require a whole different process. This is a fact. To simply omit these items on the SUP does not provide planners or decision makers bodies the true fact of what is actually occurring on the property. The holes did not state anything on their SUP about the racetrack or the salvage yard, etc., and the county accepted it. The hold harmless document signed by the hold and accepted by the county does not cover the racetrack or any other activities on this property. The other activity cannot and should not be ignored. The whole property is owned by the LLC. Everything is tied together. I know that in October of 2019, MX track was expanded from a small oval along my border to encompass the entire back part of the property. Now at least 20 acres in size, or roughly half the property. This was not included on the SUP. With multiple high jumps, this is certainly an accident waiting to happen. There are no noise restrictions listed on this SUP. We are 3/4 of a mile from the Kansas Turnpike ourselves. The sound from the Turnpike is no more than 30 decibels at our property. The sound from the racetrack often exceeds 100 decibels. I have a documented 50% hearing loss. I can hear the motorbikes on the inside of my building, and this track does not give me or my family the ability to peacefully live on our land. There's no screening around the racetrack besides my barbed wire fence. The property is only 667 feet wide. The Hulls did not reach out to any of the neighbors to negotiate anything before they started these activities.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
No. It's public comment. We don't interact.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Will it matter if I tell you how emotional this special use permit?
Could you start with your name?
Oh, sorry. Rebecca Swearingen, 24921 Loring Road.
Morning.
Will it matter if I tell you how emotional this special use permit has been, how Tri-Hole has to continue to eat out our property, our high livestock mortality rate this last year has been after living here for 29 years due to the road dust, loss of income, and the extreme anguish it has taken on my family? No, not at all. Because feelings, what you do for the community, the loss of a loved one, we've all experienced this. This isn't what this is about, and none of these are a reason to vote yes for an SUP. The Planning and Zoning Committee has openly said that the Tri-Hole Company has been working without a special use permit for over 2 years. They were scheduled for an earlier meeting and did not comply with the county and were put into a cease and desist order that they clearly violated. Yet they were not fined and continue to carry on daily with the business with no sign of following the guidelines for the SUP. At the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, they openly stated that the time frame would not work for them for jobs. And yet again, just this Monday night after dusk, here came a crane. Please look at the truth and facts versus hearsay. This isn't about being a good neighbor. It's about saving our neighborhood, our quality of life that we have known on that road. Ironically, rural America has become viewed by a growing number of Americans as having a higher quality of life, not because of what it has, but rather because what it does not have. Don A. Dillahan. Keep commercial business out of a preserved agricultural land. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in public comment on an agenda item?
Roger Swearingen, 24921 Loring Road. Our family owns 4 plots along there. I probably have the most frontage along Loring Road. Biggest concern I've had speaking to real estate agents is with what they've done there with the site, the industrial traffic that comes along that road and the dangers it's presented. It's probably dropped my property values anywhere from 15 to 20%. And the amount of land we have and the resale for what it's bringing per acre around us, that's probably cost me over $100,000. The bridges both ways of their house are undersized to handle the weight and the size of the equipment they have. You propose that they have to go to 2440. It goes over a large culvert with no sides and a 10 or 15 foot drop off, which is very hard to get by either side when you have the cranes come at you. I've almost had a head-on collision with them exiting the highway onto the dirt road. So I think that the engineer that examined their driveway said it needed to be a certain width and angle to get on there, and I don't think the end of the road entering the highway meets that width, and it's much harsher of an angle to get onto the highway than into their driveway. I'm pro small business. I owned a construction company for 33 years. I understand the success they have, and we tolerated when they started. One small crane up and down the road really did not have much of a footprint on our neighborhood, but they have grown into an industrial-sized business. Their footprint far exceeds their property anymore and has changed the whole atmosphere of our neighborhood from a quiet country rural establishment with third and fourth generation family farms there to an industrial area that just is not designed and built to safely handle a commercial operation of that size. I think it's time that this county is at a crossroads on where they have to go with zoning and what they allow in residential and rural areas. The Hulls are a victim of their own success. They've outgrown the facility that they're on. It's time they move to a commercial size property with a commercial size business. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on an agenda item? And we'll move on to administrative business. Any administrative business this time, Mr. LOUGHRY?
Just a couple of things, Commissioners. First, just wanted to remind you all that we are in an open enrollment, so if any of the Commissioners need to make any changes to their benefits, they need to see about scheduling that with HR. I know you guys sometimes get busy with all the other stuff going on and forget that that also applies to you when you see those emails. Secondly, the budget, it will be, the public hearing for the budget will be set for August 19th. That'll be going into the newspaper. Once it goes into the newspaper, there can be no changes upwards. It could only be changed downwards. And so basically today, if there were any changes, that the last day would be today. As it is, it's exactly like we discussed at our last budget meeting. There's a $0.25 reduction across the county. So those are the only two things I had for administrative business.
Okay. Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank all the election workers, the poll workers, the clerk's office. They had a challenge this year with elections with the COVID situation, and everything worked. I'm glad everybody got out and voted, and I want to congratulate the winners of the election. Chad didn't run. Does that make you a loss?
That makes me a loser.
That makes you the loss that you didn't run.
He's perhaps the biggest winner.
Probably the biggest one. But anyways, we got through it, and hopefully it goes that smooth in November. And this one, I guess, the administrative business for our senior county counselor. I guess we got a ruling last Friday from the appeals court. I read that. I just want to make sure I understand it correctly, because what I read in there, it said we had 2 former county commissioners that basically cost the county lots of money.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, David Van Paris. Yes, the Court of Appeals issued an opinion Friday morning in a case that the county's been litigating for the past several years. The ruling of the Court of Appeals affirmed a lower court decision which dismissed the claims that had been lodged against the county. In essence, the opinion states that established county law does prevail over attempts by past commissioners to extend a contract well past the term of their service of office. Further dealt with, disposed of some accusations of improper employment practices by the county. Did point out that actions had been taken by prior commissioners that did not comply with Kansas law, and as a result, the resulting contract was void. Long and the short of it is, and I will provide you each a copy of this opinion, is that the county has prevailed again on this matter, and we'll deal with the matter appropriately. For a more in-depth discussion, it'd probably be best to do so in executive session, but I would state that the claims against the county were substantial, and I believe the risk of adverse results has been substantially reduced, if not totally eliminated.
So is there any way that we can go to get our attorney fees back?
If the board would wish, I can explore that option.
What are we looking at? Over $100,000?
Well, the total cost of the county as a result of some of the actions taken by prior commission probably approach $1 million.
$1 million?
The attorney's fees are substantial as well.
Well, I feel like we owe it to the taxpayers and do our fiduciary duty to try to recoup them of this loss.
If that's the consensus of the board, I will act appropriately.
Need a motion?
No.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I'll look into the matter and give you further details at an early opportunity.
We need to send a message and stop these frivolous lawsuits. We also need to send a message to commissioners that they cannot break the law. So, well, anything else on that? We'll just...
Well, that
I had one thing on
companion.
Okay.
The missing documents.
Absolutely. What about our missing personnel file? Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Culbertson.
That matter has been examined. Based upon this result, I will be conferring with our counsel on that as to the next step to take to secure voluminous county personnel records that we believe are improperly held.
And just for the public to know, we had to purchase LifeLock identity theft protection because someone removed personnel files from our Human Resource Department.
Commissioner Smith, that is correct. I believe the LifeLock was approximately $30,000.
Okay.
I may not have caught the total cost of the litigation that we've engaged in here. Up to now, what do you think the county is?
Well, Commissioner, I did not wish to bother the clerk's office to ask them to compile all the expenditures due to the fact that there was the ongoing election. I can do so, but it is a substantial sum.
I'd like to know, so we can share with the taxpayers how much that.
What frivolous lawsuits cost?
I will compile the cost. Commissioners, I did want to note a companion complaint filed with the Kansas Human Rights Commission. We also received the dismissal of that action from the Kansas Human Rights Commission.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. So is there any other administrative business? We'll move on to the consent agenda. Has commissioners had a chance to look at everything on the consent agenda? Does anything need to be removed from the consent agenda and voted on separately?
Yes, I would like to remove the check registry from the consent agenda. This is Commissioner KAAZ.
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the check registry removed.
So moved.
Have a second. Any further discussion on that agenda? Voting?
Aye.
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 All right.
Commissioner KAAZ votes aye.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve the check registry. Separate?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the check registry. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner KAAZ abstains.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, just real quick, and I think this is probably something that was on Aaron's radar and Building and Grounds, just kind of following up on utility cost in general. I mean, they're obviously substantial across all of the different functions, buildings, et cetera, making sure that we have done everything possible as a municipality and working with those entities to ensure that any savings gets passed on. I mean, I'm assuming that's the case. It's just been a...
Yeah, I have asked Aaron to look into, I guess, their wheeling contracts for natural gas or electric contracts so we can buy and lock in pricing. But that is part of his task, and he is looking
Okay,
into that.
perfect.
We already do the natural gas, don't we?
Yeah, and I don't think it's come to the board recently, so we might bring it back in just to get an update.
Yeah. Okay. We ready for Council on Aging? Morning, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Well, I'm here this morning to ask for your signature on some CULBERTSON grant that we have, FFCRA, for our C1 and C2 meal program. The amount is $40,643.
Commissioners have any questions on the grant?
No, I've tried to put a policy in place that we approve all grants.
All grants, yeah. We don't need
You
we
don't
need
even
it.
have to ask, that's right.
You can bring in as much money as you'd like without our approval. Huh? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the federal grant FFCRA funds for our C1, C2 Meals on Wheels program.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner KAAZ votes aye.
Let me sign that now.
I was just going to ask that, has everybody holding up okay? I mean, it's been a little while since we've seen you, so that's exciting.
Everything's
As
going
well
well.
as can be expected. I can't remember if things are slowly, any type of activities coming back around yet, or we still don't have anything,
No, we still haven't
dates?
locked in.
Okay.
Too risky.
It's very hard to keep the seniors apart. They really want to be together.
Get to visiting.
I think it's hard to keep
Understood.
anyone apart.
Sure.
So,
Well, appreciate all that you do.
okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Linda.
Ready for planning and zoning. Crystal, how are you today?
Well, Mr. Chairman, how are you?
So far, so good.
Good morning.
Commissioners, I have before you a request for approval of Resolution 2020-25. This is a special use permit for Tri-Hole Crane Rental. They are a crane rental company located in southwestern Loughrry County along LOUGHRY Road. They have been operating without a special use permit for the last several years. When we sent them a letter indicating that they needed to come in, they did come in immediately. The business rents cranes and other heavy equipment in order to be used on jobs elsewhere. It's stated that typically once a crane or other equipment has been rented, it stays on the job site for quite some time. Obviously, it's very expensive to move those. So until the job is done, it stays on the site. We did have the county engineer consultants go out and take a look at the driveway and at the road there on LOUGHRY Road to determine whether or not improvements needed to be made. The county engineer determined that due to the limited traffic volume, that substantial road improvements were not warranted, that a traffic impact fee was warranted. However,
what is the traffic volume? Do you know what the numbers are?
It's less than 10 vehicles a week.
Less than 10 vehicles a week?
Yeah.
And when was that last check?
Oh, probably March.
And that's associated with the equipment rental, not
Correct,
just
correct.
operations.
Not
at the business.
operations,
I
yes,
mean,
yes, correct. The driveway did need substantial improvements. The applicants have submitted an engineering memo stating what they need to do. The county has accepted that. The request meets the requirements for a special use permit in this zoning district. In the event that the SUP is granted, staff recommends an approval of 3 years because of the fact that they were operating without a special use permit, and also due to the nature of this business, so that we can keep an eye on it. It's important to note that a valid protest petition was submitted on July 27th, which requires a supermajority of 4/5 to approve the resolution. The Planning Commission voted 8-0 to recommend approval of this. The holes are here and will answer any questions you may have, as will I.
Crystal, what like fines, for example, do we have in place for businesses that operate after it's been recommended or required, obviously, or been recognized? So a lot of times it's self-reporting and/or neighbors reporting, but what are the fines associated with operating?
Fines are imposed until code support, and I'll let Mr. Van Peer speak more explicitly.
Commissioner Shimke, members of the commission, there are two avenues whereby the county can enforce its resolutions. The first is an action in the district courts, a civil action to basically enforce what would be a Class U undefined misdemeanor, and that is a violation of your resolutions, which you have the power to adopt. In that case, the penalty is a fine for each day of violation of not more than $500, and I believe actually not more than 30 days in jail. With respect to actions in codes court, the maximum fine that can be imposed per day of violation is $250, and again, a relatively nominal jail sentence, I guess, unless you're the one serving it. But those are the avenues whereby the county can enforce its regulations.
Okay.
A question for Crystal. If this was a new applicant and they came at this location zone like this, would you consider this to be a suitable usage?
My recommendation would still be that it meets the criteria for a special use permit in the county. Certainly make an argument that it should be in a more commercial location, but I can also make an argument that we have allowed these sorts of businesses in these sorts of locations with a special use permit in the recent past.
Crystal, some of the concerns about some of the other operations that could be conducted on the site. So, again, I think those are sometimes hard to validate one way or the other, but if someone were to do motocross with their friends versus charging people to attend or enter races, I'm assuming there's a commercial aspect to that versus a recreational aspect. The same thing would go for salvage. I don't know about everybody else, but I live near and drive by many of parcels that you question whether or not it's a salvage yard. Turns out they may just be hoarders. I don't know where you draw the line unless there's financial transactions that occur with some type of regularity, in which case it is deemed commercial versus...
Sure. So the two things that we looked at, the internet is a really great thing. right? So our code enforcement officer took a look around the internet to, find out, like, hey, if I want to go use this track, like, how do I do that? Do they have a business site? Are they advertising on Facebook for using the track, that sort of thing? And then we appeal to our appraiser's office and ask, what do they think? And at this time, the appraiser's office has determined that this is not a commercial use. In conjunction with the fact that Mr. Anderson, our code enforcement officer, couldn't really find a way, couldn't find a commercial listing for the racetrack. So those two things in conjunction lead our office, and with what the Holes have told us, I understand that it is loud, and I understand that people don't like it. My neighbor in town rides his dirt bike. It is very frustrating to me.
You're in the city.
But I live in town, right? So, but out in the county, we don't have noise ordinances, and we don't have anything that prohibits somebody from having a really large racetrack on their property. If it were to be a commercial use, then they would need to get a special use permit for the racetrack.
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I share some concerns with what I would consider to be industrial use because of the salvage of the large air conditioner units, and that those are being transported from another site to the property. So I question the zoning, that it's really it's not the commercial use. I would say that there is more of an industrial use going on there.
I have a question for Mr. Hall.
Could you come forward, Mr. Hall?
Mr. Hall or Mr. Hall? I said Hall.
No.
Oh, we got Hall and Noel.
Oh,
sorry. I don't even have a mascot.
All right.
Okay.
Morning, Bill.
For the size of the equipment that's coming out of that driveway and for this type of a road, it looks like it has a 20-foot easement on both sides. Would you consider this to be a recommended use for a non-commercial area gravel roadway?
Well, for previous discussions, two things, I guess. One, the applicant, on behalf of their engineer, did submit the turning radius study that outlined the requirements that need to be in place for the width of the roadway. I believe was 22 feet, and that the entrance needed to be at least 55 feet wide. So it would require a 60-foot culvert in order for you to have the turning radius to come off of the gravel roadway. Typically, a gravel roadway is between 18 and 24 feet wide, so it is in that medium range of a gravel roadway. From previous discussions, we discussed easels or equivalent loads, and so ideally, under ideal situations, you would see commercial uses in commercially zoned areas, but obviously we're in a situation where a person's applied for a conditional use permit to operate a commercial business in a residentially zoned neighborhood. And so the equivalent load of a crane to a passenger vehicle is significantly high from previous discussions. That I don't have before me today the specific information, but it is safe to assume that one crane trip is the equivalent of several thousand car trips. And so the amount of traffic on the road currently, excluding the conditional use permit, would be exceeded from the use of the roadway by one crane, probably. If the roadway, I don't have the specific numbers, but for example, if the roadway had 100 cars a day on it and the equivalent vehicular traffic of one crane is 2,000 cars a day, you're looking at an impact on the roadway, since it is a gravel roadway. Gravel roadways can be graded if they become wheel-rutted. If the road were to be chip and sealed or had other hard surfaces, then the maintenance of such roadway would be more expensive.
So typically, in a situation like this, you'd want to have the road a hard surface.
Typically, that would be the ideal scenario, would be that would be located on a hard surface roadway, but once again, that's for your guys' consideration with a conditional use permit or special use permit process.
One issue I had was talking to some of the neighbors is when the crane comes down the road, they're saying it creates a dangerous situation coming off of 2440 where it fills the entire roadway, and you can't even get a car beside it. And there's been some near accidents, according to the neighbors. So, how would we resolve such a situation like that?
That's a KDOT intersection.
That's a KDOT intersection. So into the KDOT right of way, we don't really have jurisdiction to do intersection improvements as we tie into KDOT right of way. Typically, depending on weather conditions and maybe even ground conditions of groundwater, I can see where someone driving a large commercial vehicle would want to stay near the center of the roadway if you had shoulders that had become soft at all, in order not to get sucked into a ditch, which is a typical application for both agricultural and commercial traffic. They tend to try to stay near the center of the roadway and not get over onto the shoulders of gravel roadways as much, depending on the roadway. You'd have to really take a look at this roadway in order to see the crown of the road and the density of the shoulder.
Bill, you're clearly the subject matter expert on roadways and what they can withstand or can't withstand, and I realize we get all kinds of different engineering summaries, but in looking at the road today, it sounds like this business has already been in existence for some time. Have we seen any deterioration of the road? Because it seems like when a road was put in place, who it was put in place by, what methodology was used, even in a gravel roadway, all are variables. And so I'm curious if the 10 cranes a week or whatever that number ultimately ends up being, and this has been going on for a number of years, have we seen substantial erosion or deterioration of that area of roadway? Does anybody know? You weren't here, so that's an unfair question. I'm just curious if anybody on your staff has commented one way or the other.
I haven't received any comments from staff, but I haven't also asked that question to staff specifically, so wouldn't be in a position where I could state what impact it currently has had on the roadway.
But we'd used Olson to determine this.
Yeah, Olson did the analysis of the application process for the current condition of the roadway.
I will say that when we did the review with Olson, one of the things that were brought up about the gravel road was, and I think Bill just mentioned it, that maintaining the gravel is actually easier than if it was a chip seal. If it was a chip seal road, this traffic would have tore it up long ago. So maintaining the gravel is actually easier for the county to maintain the gravel. That doesn't mean it's a good use. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if it were a paved road, if it wasn't designed to the standards it needed to be, it would cost us much more and we would be less likely to be able to allow the use. That being said, we have countywide zoning for a reason. It's not to protect the property owner, it's to protect those who own property around them. So that's why this requires a special use permit, because we're allowing them to step outside what the normal zoning would allow in that area. But the road holding up, Olson's reviewed it and did not have an issue with that as far as any weight limits or anything like that. From a maintenance perspective, they thought it would probably be less expensive for us to maintain because we could pull a grader in there and clean out the ruts versus having to re-asphalt the road. So I did have a question, though, that came up that's a good one. Did this require any kind of KDOT review since they're accessing the KDOT, and did KDOT have an opinion on it?
So KDOT was made aware of it. KDOT did not provide anything in writing. I did have a phone call with them. They did not seem overly concerned. One of our requirements was that they not turn left out of their driveway to head east across the bridge that's over I-70, but instead they would need to turn west to head to Houston Road, which KDOT supported that requirement.
Who did you speak to at KDOT?
Oh, goodness. I want to say Rex Tiller, but that's not right. That's who I typically talk to. I'll go back and look and I will let you know. But his name. Because it's with the KTA, not KDOT, KTA.
Rex is right. That's the first name.
But it wasn't.
KTA.
But it wasn't Rex. I
Oh,
want to say
okay.
Rex because that's who I normally talk to, but that's not who it was. I will go back and look though. However, they didn't have substantial concerns. They didn't have substantial concerns about them going over the bridge that is over I-70 either. They made the point that Chieftain Road 2440 is made to handle truck traffic, whereas Loring Road, especially the longer they're on Loring Road, is not made to handle it, which is why we made the condition that they head to Chieftain Road as opposed to their other routes that they have taken.
Well, before I would want to vote for this, I'd want to have something in writing from them because I've had the neighbors tell me that they've almost been run off the road at the 2440 location. And if KDOT is okay with that, then if that's in writing that they say they're okay with that, I'm okay to move ahead. But because I've had the safety concern raised, I think that's something that should be resolved.
Crystal, we renew, dozens of SUPs throughout the year, and rarely do we get any feedback from concerned neighbors for most existing businesses. Now, we get a lot of feedback, probably more negative than positive as to new SUPs, depending on the use. So my question is, whether it's a 3-year, a 5-year, or a 20-year, what is the process for concerned neighbors in regards to complaints? I mean, the reason it is conditional or special is because it can also be revoked, right? If you're doing things outside of our requirements, restrictions, recommendations, it can be revoked. We're typically going to know that more so by resident feedback. So how, from a renewal perspective, since we haven't had one that I'm aware of, at least since I've been here, come up with, without support or their neighbors were okay with it, if things if the operation continued to grow, if there continued to be challenges, what is that process to a SUP being revoked?
So the process is actually the same as granting a special use permit. The first thing we would do is if we got a complaint, we'd go out and we take a look and contact the property owner and we substantiate the complaint. Oftentimes, those complaints cannot be substantiated, and that's just the nature of this, right? However, sometimes they are. We give them an opportunity to remedy the complaint. If they have remedied it, then we put a note in the file and everybody goes on about their day. It has not happened in my time here where somebody has not been willing to play by the rules. However, if they don't, then we would issue a cease and desist order. We would take it back before the Planning Commission and say, they're not meeting these requirements. And the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners will ultimately have to say on whether or not to revoke the special use permit.
So that's the process to it. The claims have to be able to be substantiated.
Correct.
Because it's not a preference. It comes down to policy and rules. One of my big issues I have is just how long did the business operate without a special use? And I find it difficult to believe that anybody operating a business doesn't realize that's a contingency, because if I did the math right based on what David shared with me, at $250 a day over the course of a year, you're talking about $90,000 plus in fines operating outside of county policy. So
I think it was about 2 years.
Okay.
They operated without a special use permit, from what we could determine.
Because I don't.
Did it just start out as the property owner just buying a crane and starting a business, and he was the owner operator, I guess we'll call it?
I'm not sure. You would need to ask
Okay.
Mr. Bull that question.
We have aerial photos every 6 months, so it'll be easy enough to look back and see.
Okay. Well, I can see starting out a business and just you, and then.
Well, the applicant's here. I'd love to hear kind of how that started, and I'd love to understand it, because I'm about as pro-business as you can get, but it's also by doing it the right way. So.
All right. I had a couple questions, too, if Mr. Hall would come up. My concern is the type of business he has. I don't know how he could operate 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. and get your cranes back if you had to have them back home by 5 o'clock. The county's rented cranes, and we couldn't make them kind of time with it. So.
My name is Dustin Hall. I do live at 24838 Loring Road, and I am the trial crane. And the hours are very restrictive for us. We would like to have a little bit more leniency on our hours. The company did start with just me. Probably for the first year, there was never even a crane there. It stayed on the job site, the contract that I had started, I had had there for a while. For the first few years, it was just me. And then my son turned 18 and graduated and decided that's something that he would like to do. So, naturally we purchased a crane for him to run. It was me and him for a very long period of time again. And then my other son graduated. So we did purchase another crane for him. Sadly, my son did die. He did have a CDL. He was getting his crane certs, so it would have been a complete, 3, me and my 2 sons. My daughter is now 18. She will be, she actually has joined our business, and she will be getting her CDL before too long. But I did have to hire somebody because, the loss of my son, I did have a substantial investment sitting there, and so I did hire somebody. So we're real new to starting a business and making sure we're doing everything right. And we were trying. I went to the state of Kansas for all my restrictions and wants and needs for our big trucks and our cranes and our insurance requirements, axle loads that we're supposed to have, and basically everything I thought that we need. And so it has kind of grown a little bit. And on the special use permit, that must have been something for a little while I overlooked. I didn't see, didn't know. Almost like I'm a brand new business owner.
Well, if you're working in the city, where does your work take you? Are you how far west, east?
We usually try to stay within a couple hours of our shop.
Okay.
So, a lot of stuff does take us to the city. But it takes us anywhere. Agriculture, we do a lot of grain bins. I just got a call yesterday because the tractor was flipped over in a ditch. And it was an emergency. We went to go get out there to get to the tractor. Luckily the guy had, gotten the tractor off of him and flipped it over with, I'm assuming, another tractor before he got there. So we do a lot of stuff for the farms. A lot of cranes. You got your grain bins, your elevators, your grain legs. They all require cranes.
So if you were on a job 2 hours away, you'd have to leave at 3 o'clock. You'd have to shut a job down at 3 o'clock to be home by 5. Is that what the 5 o'clock is? The cranes have to be pulled in the yard by 5?
Yeah, and we based that off of the hours of operation that Mr. Hull stated in his narrative. That's how we typically establish hours of operation. As long as they're reasonable, we support them. So
you'd rather have different hours?
I would rather have different hours. We don't actually, when we get back to the shop, it's, in general, we're not doing anything there other than maybe filling the trucks up or, piddling with them. But we're not actually using them there. So majority of the time, it comes in, 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever time it comes in. Usually they pull in, fuel up, and we're done for the day.
So what hours would you rather have if you were going to have your druthers?
I would love to have probably 8, 9 o'clock at night and be able to pull in there, because if a job gets finished here in the summertime, it's still light at 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. And with cranes, we're going to work usually until dark unless, we have an emergency, then we'll work, after dark. Something happens. We do a lot of stuff for the hospitals. Once you're on a hospital, once you're working for the power company, once you're working for a railroad, whoever you're working for, something like that, they will not let you leave until the job's done. It's just unsafe for us to leave.
Do you have an alternative if you couldn't park them there? Do you have another place you could park your cranes?
Not as of this point, I don't.
If this were an industrial park, there wouldn't be any restrictions on time coming in and out. So you could come in at midnight if you wanted to, if it were in an industrial park. So that's one of the big differences. Trying to get an SUP for an industrial use in a residential neighborhood, that's the reason we have industrial parks. So
Well, but just starting out, though, you got to grow your business to evolve into
Very
an
true.
industrial park. You know,
Very true.
Miles Construction started out on a house at 163rd and Leavenworth Road, and it was gravel.
Yeah, and I'm all for small business and growing in the county, and the reason SUPs even got created. The question is, when do you outgrow that footprint of a small business, and when do you no longer fit the neighborhood? That's the problem.
Crystal, you said that we've made exceptions throughout the county on similar situations like this. Do you have kind of a synopsis or a list of those, or I mean, how many have we made exceptions to, and if we have, obviously that's an issue with our policy.
Well, when you say exceptions to, do you mean how many special use permits have we granted?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
Right.
I don't have an exact number, but off the top of my head here, I can think of 7 or 8 businesses that are similar to this out in the county. Admittedly, most of those are on hard surface roads, which is certainly a benefit to be on a hard surface road. They're not all on hard surface roads. We also, as you recall, very recently approved an event center just down the road from this, where they're going to have between 300 and 400 cars, every Friday and Saturday for weddings on this exact same road. And no, those aren't cranes, but they're still, several hundred cars that create an impact to the neighborhood. Like I said, we just approved 2 months ago.
And then,
This is Commissioner Cobb.
go ahead.
I would argue that an event center is a little bit different of a type of business than a construction type business. I do have a question. How many cranes at present time does Tri-Hole have on the premises?
How many cranes?
Crane? We actually have 4.
Yes.
4 cranes.
And just in,
And you began with 1, and the neighbors seem to not have any kind of issue with that. But as you've grown, why did you consider looking at one of these industrial parks that are located within the county?
financially, it would be hard for us to do right now because, like I said, we are putting most of our money back into our company to grow. But I have not actually gone and physically looked or got prices on other places yet.
And I think that's the issue, is the type of business. I think that's what makes this job so hard, is every situation is unique, so we have to figure out what type of business is it. Is it a small business? Is it outgrown its footprint? Does it fit with the neighborhood? Moreover, how much effort is the business owner putting into getting along with the neighbors? For instance, is the road adequate to also accommodate the neighbors' traffic? Has there been fences put up, landscaping, trees, to make it more aesthetically pleasing, to appease the neighbors? Because you have rights for your own property. The problem is figuring out when do those rights overstep your neighbors' rights for enjoying their property too. So I'm all for small business in the county, but we've got to decide when is that no longer a small business.
Well, yeah, there's no automatic threshold of whether it's 1, whether it's 2, or whether it's 8. I mean, at some point, I do realize you probably reach an impasse where you've got equipment trying to leave and equipment trying to come back at the same time, and maybe that's a natural collision course. But I was thinking about the hours of operation, not to pivot from what Commissioner Culbertson shared, but I would actually think pulling that larger equipment out before rush hour in the morning and after rush hour in the evening makes a lot more sense. I mean, if I had to have a crane take up 2440, I would think it would make sense at 4 a.m. versus 7. Mm-hmm. Now, that disrupts neighbors as well, so that I understand the challenge there. Now, it seems like you're going to go out on site and they could be there for days, oftentimes weeks. If it's a big enough job, it's hopefully months. That's a better deal for you, I assume.
one thing about, like, they keep saying cranes. These cranes are sitting on 8'6" carriers, which are the same carriers that drive up and down the roads. There's no restrictions day or night in the state of Kansas for. I have one crane that has a restriction. But the other three cranes actually have no restrictions, and they are designed to be, when you're talking about a road impact, they have bigger tires on them. And we don't exceed Kansas law on axle ratings. So most of our cranes are designed to go off-road. They are designed to drive into the dirt way better than, say, a semi or pickups. I mean, that's what they're designed to do. So the improved surface, definitely makes them move a lot easier. But I could drive through the field pretty much with all of ours all the way down, if the neighbors let me. I could drive all the way down to the field to the highway if I had to.
How heavy are those cranes?
We're between 54,000 and 118.
And if you live close to a big farm, I don't see it as any different than combines and tractors going down the same road.
Grain carts are worse.
Grain trucks, yeah.
Grain carts.
Yeah,
The single axle grain carts.
Yeah.
And I might mention, like on the bigger crane, you're asking about the weight. Because it's considered what they call an all-terrain crane, it's a computerized controlled suspension system. So if I drove up to this desk right here and it was lower, I go to drive over it. When it's in a road mode like it would be, it's going to apply weight under that front axle. It's going to relieve the weight from the axle that's going over this. It's going to apply weight back here, and that's all going to be done through the crane itself. So it monitors, its weight loads. And like I said, we are not, our axle ratings, that's one of the reasons why we bought our stuff, our equipment is because I want to be able to move freely, not have to go 3 hours out of the way to go around a bridge in the state of Kansas or Missouri. I want to be able to go across them. So that's why I work closely with the Kansas Highway Patrol, trying to make sure when we buy equipment, I call them up usually before I buy the equipment and ask them, here's the measurements of my axles, here's everything we have, what can I do? And they usually are very free and open about the information.
So you had issues as far as, these issues neighbors have brought up about the roads. Do you think there's anything that you personally think between you and the neighbors can just be resolved in-house, like as far as the roads, or because it's always better if you can do private decision-making as opposed to
And I would love
public.
to. Me and my wife had even talked about, so we have horses, I don't understand the mortality rate on their animals. My horses are right next to it, and they are doing very well. There's 3 brand new babies sitting on the ground the last 3 years. So, clean bill of health out of all of our horses. But one of the things that me and my wife even talked about, if they would like, between the Swearingers and our place, I don't know what it costs to go down there and put that spray down, the dust control.
Chemicals. Mm-hmm.
I'd be willing, if somebody could shoot me a price, I'd be willing to look at it and put it down.
Scottwood
Industries, yeah. What was it running this year? $1.30 maybe a foot?
Yeah,
$1.20.
$1.35 to $1.52, I think.
Yeah.
For 22-foot roads, probably about $1.40.
So $1.40
Running
for
foot.
linear foot. So I don't know how many linear feet you got, but
What about helping with doing additional rocking of the road?
There's no impact on this, is there? Any impact money on this?
There's a traffic impact.
That's what I meant. There's traffic impact fee on this road, and what's already factored in.
What was the amount?
it's like 1,500 or something. 15, 32, 14. Mr. Holt, what anything you could share just on again, a lot of the noise complaints don't seem to be related to your crane operations or your trucks, but maybe some of this motocross.
Yeah,
You want to address the motocross or salvage or any of these other things that have come up while you're here?
Yeah, the motocross track has been there. My son was, his goal was to go pro. And so the motocross track has been back there. It's been back there since we bought the land. It has moved all the way around the land. It's gone from, it's actually gotten a little bit smaller. We had an arena cross track. Now we're going to turn back in for our horses to move the horses over into another spot. So we'll be getting rid of a smaller piece, but that's not the piece that's of his concern. That's worried. But when we bought the land, it was landlocked. There should have never been anybody houses back there. So that's the reason why there is motocross back there. out back. And we have on several occasions said, hey, come talk to us. You're having an event. We'll ask the kids not to come out. But it doesn't seem to make him happy. We've been very lenient. They were farming 40-some feet, 50-some feet over on our property for years, took out our trees just recently. They cut down a bunch of our fence, thinking it was their property, our trees. So now the motocross track is actually 50 foot farther off of their property because, they thought their property was closer. So we are going to help out. Track's now 50 foot farther away from their property line. I don't know do you have a recommendation that you'd like to see as far as like motocross stuff?
Well, no, it's more about, is there any commercial aspect to it, or it's your son or friends?
There's no commercial stuff to the motocross now.
Okay.
It's just kids that are,
As far as I know, there's no limit as far as dirt bikes or four-wheelers or anything else in the country that I'm aware of.
Well, and there's
on
not
someone's personal property.
There's not if it's your own personal track, and I've got a lot of experience with motocross tracks, so I wanted to bring that up too. It's probably something that we're not supposed to talk about because it's not part of the SUP, so really we're not even supposed to talk about the motocross track. But I got a lot of calls wanting to deny the SUP because of the motocross track, so I had to explain to them that's not part of the SUP. But since we're talking about it, I understand how motocross tracks work. You build one on your own property, especially if it was there first and then the neighbors come later. If they bought or built their house after the track was already there, I kind of have a deaf ear to those people. But there's also getting along with your neighbors. The new four-stroke bikes are way louder than the two-stroke bikes were. So that presents a whole new problem, really. It's just not cool to have somebody riding four-stroke bikes on the track 8 hours a day or for a couple hours during supper time. Or, if you got neighbors that got babies and the baby's trying to sleep and you got 15 riders, and the bigger issue is who are the riders. If it's just your kids, really there's nothing you can do about that. But if they're having friends over and they ride a couple hours and then new friends show up and they ride a couple more hours and then other friends of friends show up and they ride a couple more hours, then you're riding 8-10 hours a day. So even though it's not commercial, it kind of crosses over to commercial. For instance, if you're sponsoring riders, does Tri-Hole sponsor any riders in races?
We give money to kids for like stuff that they would like to have, graphics or whatever. But
So
I don't actually legally or on my taxes show that I write anything off for.
So how many people do you think ride on the track that aren't family? Percentage-wise, say. So. Because I know how this works. Then pretty soon there's somebody shows up that said, oh, a friend of a friend said we could ride here. And then you don't even know the friend that they named. And so pretty soon you got all kinds of people riding.
We travel quite a bit with motocross. We race. So, it isn't uncommon for us to be friends with people in Texas.
Say, come ride on my track.
And it's a very common thing to do in the motocross world.
And if you got a really cool track, that causes you problems. And that's what I'm trying to say is, even though it's not part of this SUP, it's an issue. Even though we don't have a rule against private motocross tracks, are they really private? Are they really just for your use? When you start having a lot of people coming over and riding on your track that aren't family, it starts to be a problem for the neighbors. So that's part of what I'm trying to say here is, this small business is one thing. Figure out how to get along with the neighbors because it's a big issue if you have a bunch of protests for a business you're trying to put in an area that's not zoned for that. But then you're adding other things to it, like noise of a motocross track, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there just needs to be more consideration done to get along, and I think things could work out. But it just there's a lot of issues.
Is there a way to ameliorate the noise between like your property and Mr. Irvine's property? Would there be some kind of maybe you could work together on putting some pine trees? I don't know what's a good way to.
If you'd like, I would go and buy. I think those what they call it. They're like an evergreen that grows really fast, and they would make a blind.
But it also cuts back noise.
I would be willing to go through there and buy some. They grow really fast, so go buy some small trees. It's back there long.
Well, I hope you guys can work that out privately.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there's other things you can do. Aftermarket pipes, they're way louder and they're not really necessary. So some things that you can do to mitigate some of the neighbors' irritation is factory pipes. Not a lot of riders at times of the day that would, if somebody's sitting down, they just get home from work and they sit down and eat supper and they're hearing 15 four-stroke bikes running. It's just not a good idea.
They're all going to be off-hour use, right? I mean, that's the thing. Your kid's working, you're working. The reality is it's, evenings and weekends, or mostly weekends, and that's when neighbors are trying to enjoy the serenity that is the rural area. But it's
I know those blinds, they work as far as like
And you do have a very cool track. I went out and saw it. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, we enjoy it. It's one of the little satisfactions I have is going out there and riding around on the track and,
Mr. Hull, you'd mentioned that the property was landlocked. Or you mean because it was a minimum maintenance road?
Yeah, there was never supposed to be anything built back there. And, other than the one field by Millerettes behind us, it was always supposed to just be, corn and beans back there. My other neighbor on the other side back there, he's perfectly fine with it. He loves hot rods and motorcycles, and he has a lot of cars too. But the other side over there was definitely landlocked. There was nothing back there when we bought it.
Because it's a minimum maintenance road. 246 is minimum maintenance part of it. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't even realize you could build a house or anything back there on that road.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think you're to a point where you need to make a decision. Do you want to try to keep your business there, or do you want to have the motocross track? I mean, it's kind of a point where if we approve this temporarily for 3 years, that kind of puts you on probation for 3 years with the neighbors. So if you can figure out a way to get along with the neighbors, and at the end of 3 years, they're not going to protest the SUP, everything works out. So it's kind of a give and take thing.
Yeah, like I said, I've always been willing to work with them. I haven't had we offered that guy that Ed back there, when he moved back there, he met us on the motorcycles back there. And he was fine with the motorcycles back there. He met me and my son on there on motorcycles. And he came to me and wanted help putting his building up. And I told him, I said, I would love to help you put your building up. Unfortunately, he called me the day that my son died. And I was upset that I wasn't able to bring him equipment back there to help him put his. And now he was going to have to run a piece of machinery, and it kind of seemed like it went down after that. He doesn't like the motorcycles because we were unable to help him that day put his barn up.
Any other questions, Mr. Hull, or anything on this? Like I said,
This is Commissioner Paz.
Go ahead.
I was wanting to also address the issue of the salvage operations that are taking place on the property. So why wasn't that included in the application for the special use permit? Because there is a difference between a crane operating business and a salvage business.
And I guess that's part of what I'm getting at too, is if there's no privacy fencing and you're having
None of that can be seen from the backside of the property, the salvage stuff now. It's 900 feet. Yeah, most of the salvage stuff is over 1,000 feet probably off the road. And we are getting rid of a lot of it. Gotten rid of a lot of it in the last month just to get rid of it. And I did bring this up before, that we usually don't have that kind of stuff there. It usually is not something we really keep around, but we do bring it and we cut it up and we usually donate it back to scholarship funds. And I know we just gave a scholarship Saturday, a big barrel race. But we usually cut that up, and that's usually where I put that money into. And my son did die 2 years ago, so I did not work that winter to probably get rid of it. My wife was in a major car accident this year, so I was kind of limited on getting rid of some of that stuff. But we have been working really hard lately, getting rid of it as fast as we can. Anything that may be what they consider a nuisance. I did get a visit from somebody called I can't remember what the guy's name is. Thomas Hayes, Waste Management Program, Department of Health and Environmental, on us. He came out to the property, looked around, couldn't find anything that to write up a report about. That he looked around for hazardous waste and anything I guess his department would be looking for. I freely let him walk around back, and he said there was nothing here worth mentioning.
Okay, this is Commissioner KAAZ. I understand all of that. I'm just talking about the zoning. It is not zoned for industrial, or you're not asking for an industrial use zoning.
So what you're saying is you're getting rid of the salvage stuff, it's going away.
Yeah, I didn't really, I mean, in my terms, it's not a salvage. It's something we brought home we were going to get rid of. It's our product. Once it hits our trailers, we get rid of it. And, we have been, like I said, you can cut it up and use the aluminum out of it, or...
These are all AC units?
What they're complaining about is AC units, yes.
But I'm going to guess as a part of your business, you're oftentimes left with there's a product you're removing.
Yes.
They don't want it. They want you to take it with them, whether you're dealing with a rooftop unit or whatever that is.
Yes.
So you're left with, they obviously don't want it on the site. They just replaced it and got something new, right? So
Can't leave it
you're hauling it off, but you don't have a commercial site. You're not advertising to say, hey, please come drop your industrial use material at my location.
No.
You're hauling off as a part of your job.
Yes.
In which case, then you're figuring out what to do with it. And scholarship seemed like a good use if that is the case. Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Hall?
But again, like the storing the excess air conditioner units or whatever, if you were in an industrial park, wouldn't be an issue. But it's because of where you're at, it becomes an issue. That's the problem.
Any idea how much you haven't even looked into it, but as far as if you located another location to store the cranes, you probably have to lease a property.
There's probably not a place around that's close enough to us that could accommodate, if we leave a $1 million crane set in place, it's going to have to be fenced. It's going to have security there. It's going to have something because they could cause a lot of damage to one of them. So I can start looking and see what's out there that would accommodate, but I know it's going to be a very expensive deal for it to happen. I mean, I would love to here in the future do it, but as of right now, it would be a very expensive thing for us to do.
That's
I think a lot of businesses are a little concerned about the economy right now.
Oh, yeah.
On any expansions.
Yeah, we haven't looked at buying any really new equipment this year. Probably not even, just because of this stuff right here.
the part about all this that concerns me is the safety, and when I heard one of the residents tell me they turned in and about ran into your crane, and I don't know who was driving it at that point, but
I've been.
And that was at the 2440 turn, and they said it's a very perilous turn.
They like to a lot of times use their phones and drive and video us. I haven't ran into any of them. I haven't had any close call with any of them.
But you concede that it is a concern of theirs.
Yes, I do. See, it's a concern every time we get on the road. We could get into an accident. No matter driving your car, my wife was hit on a head-on collision. It wasn't her fault. The guy pulled right out. I mean, that's.
Well, I was on that road because a couple of weeks ago, or I don't know how long, a week ago, I guess. And you go, when you come 2440, it goes up, and then on the other side it drops down. And I can see if you had a crane coming up to that turn, it's going to fill the entire roadway at 2440. You're going to have a difficulty getting another vehicle in there.
I can see your concern, but we try really hard to accommodate everybody. We probably only drive about 15 mile an hour down that road with all the equipment.
That's kind of why I was wondering about if we need to talk to KDOT a little more about.
You're saying about the equivalent of 1 or 2 trips a day. You're saying 10 a week versus 100 a day.
Well, I agree. I agree, but it is.
I would like to recommend anybody that has any questions about truck traffic and anything dangerous, feel free to visit Highway 5 any day of the week.
State highway.
Or 192.
At 55 miles an hour. So
And I've
I just drive it
this-
twice a day. So
I've been driving this equipment since I was probably around 19 or 20 years old. Because there was a lot of rules and regulations back then. We could drive them without without CDLs. So I have been driving. I have yet to have an accident on the highway one of them.
Oh, I believe you're a great driver, but it's just the neighbors, the concerns when they're driving, you know.
But we did have Olson look at this.
right. We do pay a lot of money for.
We do pay a lot of money to Olson.
Yeah, but we don't have anything in writing from KDOT.
No, and I mean, that's not necessarily unusual because like I said, they were talking about 2440, and it's perfectly acceptable for these to be on Highway 2440. And KDOT is not going to evaluate our roadway. That's what our engineers.
So you're saying they weren't necessarily looking at the turn radius and all that those issues?
But Olson was.
On the driveway.
They did not look at 2440. Olson didn't.
They didn't look at the intersection? Olson would have looked at Loring.
Wilson went out and did a site visit, and the memo that they prepared for me is those were their concerns, was the driveway. I would assume that if there were additional concerns, that those concerns would have been listed.
Right.
So they did go out, they looked at the site, they looked at the driveway.
And they recommended the route going.
But now additional concerns have been raised. I think we probably should have them look at it a little closer.
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I would recommend that we table this SUP until we can have the questions that have come up answered, addressed, looked into, and then bring it back for discussion and a vote.
And what was the
What
question?
question is that? Is that the KDOT written?
Well, did Olson check out the box culverts and the bridges and the intersection coming off of the highway?
Or not exceeding on your box culverts are not exceeding.
It'd be a CMP.
I don't know. The email from Mitch says, I reviewed the attached report regarding the entrance turning template and CMP sizing. Had no further concerns or comments.
They would have reviewed any of the infrastructure under the road when they did the review.
All right.
So,
Because that was the only question I had, so it sounds like they did.
since there were additional questions raised by the residents at the turn at 2440, I think that would justify us at least having Olson look at that a little closer, or KDOT, getting us some in writing that that's okay with them.
But again, I'm confused because KDOT's not going to provide anything other than 2440 specifics, in which case it's a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
It would be anything off of 2440, which would be Leavenworth County.
So, which would be our engineer, I guess.
And Olson would have did that.
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I would like to have a little bit more information regarding the use, whether it would be commercial or industrial use for that SUP.
Well, I find it strange that Olson is not recommending any improvement to this road at all when they recommended a super highway for a sand quarry. I don't understand.
I agree with Culbertson.
Some doesn't pass smell test.
I wonder about
You're
how...
saying you'd like for us to have a condition that they bring this road up to the standards of a superhighway?
Well, no, it's just somewhere in between, though. It's like nothing or all.
Well, again, it comes back to the gravel aspect of it.
Wider gravel road, maybe.
Yeah, it's gravel, so therefore the maintenance on it is not going to be. It's not going to. When it falls apart, we can regrade it.
Understood,
versus
but what
having to
about
rebuild it.
Understood, but what about the width? You know, how wide is this gravel road? Is it wide enough for two cars to even pass each other?
Yeah,
And-
22 foot. A standard highway is only 12 each lane.
But again, I'm not going to step on Olson's toes here, but if you're talking about with the 10 trips a week, let's say, and the weights you gave, put it somewhere between 25 and 50 ton, do the math in comparison. I mean, it's not even close to.
Right.
Well, we have several issues here.
Traffic count too. It's not just the one thing. It's all the things.
Right.
Several issues. I think this should be returned to planning and zoning because he wants different hours. They're requesting certain hours.
No way would this need to go back to planning and
Well,
zoning. It passed A0.
We should, I understand, but the issue of the road needs to be resolved, and then we can figure out the road issue and the time frame. when the equipment's going to be coming in and out, and I just think there's some things that are a little
The
loose.
time is the only thing I see an issue here.
Well,
The applicant asked the planning commission about amending the hours of operation, and the planning commission felt more comfortable with leaving that up to the Board of County Commissioners. So that was brought up at the planning commission meeting.
so,
And Olson looked at the road. And we.
but I don't think Olson looked at the road when the citizens reported that they had this issue at the turn, not being able to turn in there. I'd like Olson to review that a little closer. And if that's reported to Olson, maybe they would look at it a little closer. And I think we can work out a deal here, but I think it needs to be looked at.
And I don't think resident feedback drives the engineering firm.
No.
Well, a safety issue does drive us.
Well, no, that's what they're supposed to. I mean,
When we
that's what
read
they go
the
into
Olson
every
report.
summary for safety. regardless
Exactly.
of comments.
So I'm telling you that I've had it reported by a resident that they have this, and it needs to be looked into as a safety issue. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Commissioner KAAZ, do you have any other concerns? Or was your concern the salvage part of this?
That's correct. I think that we need to consider whether or not this would be commercial or industrial zone.
Okay. And Crystal, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, so the applicants had indicated in their narrative that they do have equipment delivered to the site, industrial type equipment, like the air conditioners and such, and that's something that we had spoken about, but that equipment wasn't stored for long periods of time, and it's my understanding that anything that is new has been properly packaged, so it's not, it's waiting to go to
Well, there's
the
a
job
difference
site.
between storage and manufacturing of. Those aren't the same.
Right, and then anything that they have brought back from the site has been essentially stripped of, the antifreeze and the coolants and all of that stuff. So I guess I'm a little bit confused on the question about whether or not this is an industrial operation. From our site visit and from our conversations and the narrative, staff never felt like this was an industrial type operation. It is certainly a commercial use. There's no doubt about it. It is absolutely a commercial use. But the storage of materials was not a significant concern for staff. And staff is more than...
And again, when does the line drawn between, you're salvaging your own material from your own job versus being open to the public? Like, those aren't the same. Or I can just call you up and come get rid of some metal that I don't want. Like, that's a different use than what I'm hearing anyway. Because I don't know how what you're doing is any different than the person that has 3 cars or 50 cars. Exactly. Because it's not a commercial enterprise at that point. There's no exchange with the public. You're dealing with scraps from your job. The fact that it's metal versus lumber and you're not a general contractor in the construction industry, like, it makes no difference to me. My opinion, of course, but I mean, I don't see the difference.
Commissioner KAAZ, does that answer your question? Did Crystal answer any concerns?
Somewhat, sure.
Okay. So,
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I still would like to have an opportunity to revisit some of the, or to establish some additional conditions.
The hours of operation, what were you asking for? I didn't see that in there. The new hours that you were wanting instead of 8 to 5.
Well, it's 6 to 5.
6 to 5.
I mean, I would like to definitely try it. If we could get something at 4 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, we cover everything that we're doing.
But see, that's the problem of crossing over into a residential neighborhood.
Well, all our stuff, there's milk trucks, there's tractors that run up and down that thing. And
That's
our equipment's
true.
wider than their stuff.
That's true. But I know it's not your fault, but it's your problem.
Yeah, it is. Definitely my fault. And I mean, I guess give me what I can have, or that's what I'm asking for. Is like I said, in the wintertime, it's going to be a lot shorter because our daylight's shorter. In the summertime, the daylight's longer. So, we work longer during the summer, but during the winter, Probably 9 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd probably be home. But in the summertime, when we're working, we need to be at a job a lot of times when everybody else starts.
But, you're going to have to do what you're going to have to do your business, no matter what time frame we set here. You're going to have to run your business.
I'm trying to, yes.
What you're left
That's
with
the
is
reality.
you're going to have to take it out the day before, or it's going to have to stay the extra day. You run into challenges on the logistics alone, right? Because if you're coming up on 5 o'clock, even if the job is done, you run into a situation where you have to come get it tomorrow morning, which is not ideal, I understand.
Yeah, like I said, that's why we have 8'6" carriers, so that they can run 24 hours a day.
Right.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to point out is the challenges of making concessions to operate a special use permit in a residential neighborhood. You're not going to be able to bring this home, today because it's past 5 o'clock, or you're going to have to leave today for tomorrow's job because you can't leave at 4 o'clock in the morning like you want to. If it was in an industrial park, wouldn't have them issues. So I think it boils down to how long do your profits keep you necessary to operate where you're at versus make enough money to grow your business and move to the next step. That's
I have a 5-year permit. I would do my best to make sure that into 5 years I would have a place bought. I would go there. But as far as the time frame, would be doing it this year or next year?
Well, I think everything's uncertain this year and next year, really.
But if I could get a 5-year deal, and like I said, I would do my best to start finding a place.
This is Commissioner KAAZ. Would there be any objection from the applicant to put up some screening as far as the areas that are for the storage of salvage?
You're talking like planting trees and stuff like that, or
privacy fence. Can you see the salvage from the road?
Nobody can see it anyway.
I toured the site twice. It's up behind the air-conditioned units. We're up by the building.
I don't think you can see them from the road,
Can't see them from the road. No, you'd have your public comment.
I don't think you can see them from the road, Vicky. I couldn't when I went by.
But I think the point of that is whether or not it's any of the salvage that comes off your jobs, or if it's motocross, finding ways to make sure that you're mitigating with your neighbors and being a good neighbor and making sure that whether you can see it from the road versus whether they can see it from their porch or wherever they may be to see it.
If we want to do like that screening of the trees right along our fence line on the front of our property, that would block a lot of the view. And I'm fine with doing that. That's it's going to take a couple years for things to grow up high enough. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to come in there and plant 20-foot tall trees right real quick and easy. But
you can get 10-footers though.
Huh?
So you can get 10-footers though.
I'll get whatever it takes to block, that. I'm fine with working out something like that.
Okay. Commissioner KAAZ, you have any more questions or concerns?
Not right now. I still think that we should probably table this at least till some of those things are put down in writing as far as conditions.
Okay, and what would you like them to be? I guess, what would the board like to have added to this special use permit?
Well, this is Commissioner Cox. I would like to see some level of screening, some level of barriers to mitigate the concerns that have been expressed by the neighboring properties. And probably I would like to see that there be the improvements made at the intersection so that there is, at least off of the county road, the gravel road on Loring to do some widening so that there isn't some of the safety issues that have been brought up, that we can kind of mitigate that?
I understand
Lowering
that
at
point, but
2440.
You're talking about, again, just use, a lot of the local use is ag. I mean, you're talking about there are, 18-wheelers hauling grain. There are combines and there are tractors. There are no improvements you can make to a road that are going to make that sufficient for everybody to get by at reasonable speeds. And so,
exactly.
At the same time, if you were talking about 10 cranes coming in and out a day, that also looks very different versus what the use is. So, you're not going to, outside of building a Super 2, you're never going to mitigate what you guys can create on the occasion when you do.
But having driven out there, there is some improvements that could be made there at that intersection of 2440 ends.
We cannot make
We
those
cannot make
improvements.
them.
They're not in the right of way.
Whatever the county can do, we should look into what Olson. I think this should be brought to their attention that there's a possible safety.
Why do
issue
we
there.
pay Olson to look at these if we're not going to listen to what they say?
Well, I don't know that Olson's had a safety issue brought to their attention at that location, and I would like to bring that to their attention from the neighbors. And having driven it myself, I can understand if I was meeting a crane at that place, it would be difficult.
So, what I'm hearing is Mike would like to have Olson confirm that they looked at the intersection as a part of the summary and narrative they provided.
That's what I have.
Vicky would like to see screening implemented, some plan relative to addressing the road or any other visibility from neighbors.
Around the area, the salvage area, because obviously screening in the cranes is just
Yeah,
not
because
an
you said
option.
you had 48.
No, that's correct. I specifically mentioned the salvage area, and I'd like to see that there's, if they would be willing to work with the neighbors to create some kind of a sound barrier as well.
And it
Or
sounds
a letter from
too.
KDOT that basically suggests what you did before, that they have relative to what 2440 in that intersection, their belief based on whole cranes usage.
Well, and I can tell you, there's no sound barrier that's going to work for motocross bikes.
That's a whole other issue.
That's going to be a management issue.
But we're not proving it.
I know. That's not part of this.
But relative to the SUP and to Jeff's point, I think I'm just going to guess that motocross is something that costs you money, where your crane business makes you money. And so I think at some point there could be a tipping point as to putting any permitting at risk, or again within your timeline, if you can figure out how to appease your neighbors and be a good neighbor before you move your business out and no longer put your business at risk. Because we're not going to sit here and police ATV use on people's property. So keeping that in mind when you start offering it to
exactly my
the network that is motocross, and I've met a ton of them. I still can't believe I know guys that are 50 years old breaking their back and neck and collarbones and everything else. It's crazy to me. But
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I'd also like to see something within the agreement that indicates that Mr. Holt would be willing to, or will actively seek transitioning the business, which is located in a residential area right now would be under the special use permit, to a business park or industrial park location, and that there would be an effort, a documented effort, that has taken place.
I would agree.
For what period of time?
The 3 years of the permit?
3 years?
Well, I would agree with that, Vicky, but to me,
How can you do that?
the temporary SUP, in essence, is that. Because it's really saying, hey, at the end of 3 years, you're either smaller, to fit the neighborhood, or you got to find a better place.
And then with what's going on in the economy, it could be smaller.
Yeah, right.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not, but let's face it.
Does that fit,
It's
Vicky,
looking good.
what you're asking?
Yeah, this is because I just want to make it clear. I do support businesses, and I very fully support the construction industry. I just want to make sure that we're looking at a process that can kind of benefit all parties involved.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear
Good
from our
luck.
senior county counselor on what's just been discussed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I have 5 points that I believe have been brought up that the board is requesting clarification on. And the first is a safety issue, and that has 2 subparts. The first is, it's my understanding the board would like to ask the Kansas Department of Transportation to provide some written indication that they have looked into the intersection of Loring Road and 2440 with respect to the use that's being proposed. And the second subpart would be that Olson clarify the scope of their review with respect to safety. Second point would be with respect to the salvage operations, that be addressed as being made part of the special use permit, even though it's a subsidiary subsidiary to the primary operation. Included within that would be review of any privacy screening for the salvage/storage area. Additional conditions, of course, are the examination of the hours that are being proposed. Again, Ms. Voth gave you accurate information. The Planning Commission did discuss the hours and believed that it would be more appropriate for them to allow this board to make any determination on that issue. And the fifth would be the general review of any traffic impact of the operation on the road. You do have an initial opinion from Olson with respect to the use of the road and no necessity for a full traffic impact study. More or less, it's my understanding the board would like a reaffirmation of that, and in conjunction with the safety issue, again, clarification from Olson of the scope of their review. So those are the notes that I have taken. Certainly they can be added to or reduced. If I could add this, the public hearing has been conducted in this matter by the Planning Commission. It's now before this board. Since there is a valid protest petition, it will require a supermajority, which under Kansas statute, and since there are now 5 commissioners, would require at least 4 affirmative votes for this special use permit to be approved. We'd just like to point out that if it were to fail at this juncture, your internal regulations provide that a special use application cannot be brought back before you for a period of 1 year. So Commissioner KAAZ's suggestion of a tabling of this matter for those additional reviews, I think, might work to the benefit of all involved.
Okay. And table it for a time of 2 weeks? Would this get done in 2 weeks?
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to Mr. Knoll and Mr. LOUGHRY on this, but my experience is that an expectation of getting anything written from KDOT in 2 weeks might be a bit short.
Okay.
I would suggest a 30-day.
30 days? Okay.
I would just ask if we can work with the applicant. So as far as proposed hours, if you're thinking about summer versus winter and what that could potentially look like, as far as what, again, it sounds like planning and zoning didn't make any recommendations. It was a suggestion was made, in which case we're then supposed to, make a ruling. But I think if you could propose what would be best and then allow us to have some dialogue on that, I think that would be good.
I would love to have a 4 to 9. I know that we very rarely ever leave. We need to leave before 4 a.m. for anything.
Well, I was thinking if you try to stay within a couple of hours, if that puts you at a job site at 7 in the morning, that is 5 versus 6, as an example. Or 5 o'clock at night, if most job sites aren't winding down until 5 and you're within a couple hours, that might look like 7. Those would be recommendations based on if you asked for 3 in the morning to midnight. I'd probably counter with something, but maybe start with the summer schedule and a winter schedule, because it sounds like that could be even winter-wise beneficial to your neighbors as well. So.
Do you have a large amount of basically emergency calls when you reference a tractor accident or a semi accident or anything?
We do have a fair share. When hospital goes down, generator goes down, transformer blows up for the power companies. we go out when they call. I mean, because we're the closest to them. That's who they usually call is whoever can get the emergency, fixed sooner than later.
Sure.
Right. So see, you're going to have some of that too.
Right.
I have one more question is, when you come out of your drive with the largest crane you have, you do not get out of the easement.
I can stay on the road, yes.
You can stay on the roadway.
Yes, the larger cranes are a little scary. So we can bring any crane I own. I can get it into this parking lot. That's what we do for a living, is we stick them in, small areas. So if it takes 4 or 5 times to maneuver into a place, we'll get it in there. But the bigger, that's the thing is the larger cranes are actually easier and more maneuverable than a smaller crane.
So now when the railroad, when they rent a crane, they'll typically have the crane out there on a site and it'll stay on the site until job is done. I guess they're leasing it is what I believe they're doing. But when you're doing a job, you're typically bringing your crane back. It's just like a one-day job.
Our stuff all varies. I mean,
So,
the cranes,
okay.
like the big crane the other day stayed out for, I think, almost 5 weeks.
Okay.
And now it does go out and come back in a day. I mean, that's not uncommon for it. Usually doesn't go out and then turn around and come back in an hour. It usually turns around, goes out, and comes back about 9 to 10 hours later. So,
Would you say your typical job is that short turnaround job, or is your typical job you're having it out there for a while? You don't have a typical job.
No, we're rental, so.
Okay.
I mean, you call me and, you need something, I'm going to try to get there as quick as I can. And there's a lot of times we show up on a job that's supposed to be one day, and we're there 4 or 5 days because the truck didn't show up, truck broke down, footing's wrong. They sent the wrong stuff. So it's not uncommon for us to go to a job, a 1-hour job, and still be there 4 days later.
Okay. So does commissioners agree with all the items that Mr. Van Perry's read off? Any other additions? So, okay. Was that? Okay. All right. So unless there's any other questions, I'll entertain a motion to table this for 30 days.
September 2nd.
Yeah.
Was that a motion? Commissioner KAAZ?
Yes, that's Commissioner KAAZ. I move that we table the SUP for Tri-Hole until September the 2nd.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the tabling of the matter? Voting?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Commissioner votes aye.
You wanting to get it done today?
Yep.
I know.
That's all right.
All right.
I think we need to get it done today. I mean, what are the things that, I know you wanted the turning study done.
I think when they reach out to Olson and KDOT and get the documentation we need, and Crystal's already said they've reached out to KDOT, and they didn't have a problem, so if she gets that and documented.
Yeah, it seems more administrative in nature
Right.
between documents from KDOT that we've done our due diligence.
Yeah.
And Olson.
I can't imagine Olson have not looked at that.
I
what
can't
we pay
either.
them.
Based on what I read, I didn't see that as an issue.
So we just get that confirmed, that they looked at everything. All right? All right,
thanks.
Thank you.
And there was never a time during any of that, but very sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, Crystal, you got another one.
One more. Commissioners, this is a request to approve Resolution 2020-26. This is a special use permit for Daily Driver. Daily Driver is an online vehicle sales business, or she's anticipating having an online vehicle sales business primarily for like farm trucks, farm equipment, farm vehicles, not tractors and such necessarily. It's a very small operation off Michaels Road along the dead-end section. The applicant has not started operating yet. She is anticipating selling 5 vehicles in her first year. That's the Kansas minimum. In order for her to keep her license, she has to sell at least 5 vehicles. She doesn't anticipate selling more than 15 vehicles in any given year. Like I said, primarily this would be done via online sales and such. The Planning Commission voted 8-0 to recommend approval of this application. I will answer any questions that you may have.
This requires a special use permit, huh?
It does, yes.
Huh.
Because she's going to store the vehicles on her property. Right.
Really?
Yes.
Uncle Sam.
I guess. I mean, I hope I'm not in violation here in my own house. All right. Anybody have any questions on this? You know, I'm pretty sure we got people operating, selling more vehicles that don't do this.
Right.
If you know of any, please let us know.
Right.
Do you have any other to add other than what we've read on this?
No, it's very, very simple.
I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2020-26.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner KAAZ votes aye.
All right.
Crystal, is still fuzzy on what kind of vehicles is she selling? Trucks, cars,
Like
hay
farm
equipment?
trucks, like old farm trucks and such. She may sell cars, but primarily she anticipates.
But hay equipment, balers.
Are you
No,
trying to
no,
pick
no,
up some
no.
equipment today? What's
I was
happening?
wondering.
Pickup trucks.
You got a baler per se?
Not that I know of.
Just one of those hoarders I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. Well, location, of course, I know where this is at. I go to all these places. It's not going to have a lot of road traffic and people to be able to see or advertise that way. So, yeah, it would be online.
That road's getting paved too, isn't it?
The one,
Just Michael's Road's getting paved next year.
I don't think this section of mine.
No? Oh, different
I could be
section.
wrong. I could be wrong. But
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think it's this section.
it goes out there
And
west of 5.
Oh,
Go
no.
out there and then hits 179th.
Not that section.
Well, eventually you snake around it.
Okay, not that section then.
It's actually a little dead end section. You'd swear it's a driveway, but it's actually part of the road.
Okay. I don't think that section.
Right. You guys got to get out more often.
Clearly.
So,
As always, it was a pleasure.
yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you, Crystal.
All right.
I don't know that I believe that.
Mr. Knoll.
Just a segment in the city's getting paved, adjacent to the city limits.
Okay.
Howdy, Bill.
How are you
Hello.
doing, Mr. Knoll?
How are you guys? So today we have two board action items to consider. The first on the agenda is the approval of a purchase of a replacement tractor with a 22-foot boom mower attachment under a government Sourcewell contract. The current equipment owned by the county was due for replacement in 2022 per the depreciation schedule. The tractor is in need of substantial transmission repairs that are approximately $26,000. The transmission on these systems also runs the hydraulic pumps. Purple Wave, we did contact Purple Wave to estimate the difference in value of the tractor as it sits in need of repairs, and then after repairs would be made, what the value of the tractor would be. The difference in value in their estimates was approximately $15,000, which is obviously $11,000 more than the repairs, or $11,000 less than the repairs actually cost. In the depreciation, the county has budgeted already budgeted $121,000 towards the replacement of this tractor and boom mower. Currently, CanEquip does have a lease return with less than 200 hours. I think they had like 186 hours on the machine from the University of Kansas State. And so their replacement cost, or their quoted cost is $110,000. Try to answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
So why is the maybe it's obvious and I don't see it. So, generally you'd have the trade value. In this case, we run everything through Purple Wave. Wouldn't the amount requested be less the cost of selling the existing?
Well, it's not. We're not trading it in. So
Right.
in this case, we would purchase it outright, so your full cost, and then we would turn around and subsequently Purple Wave or auction the item that we currently have.
So we're approving 110,000, but ultimately 26, 25, some amount is going back into the fund based on the sale of the existing.
Yes, that's correct. It's not a trade-in, so we're not looking at a difference in value right now.
I got it. So our cost is roughly 85 or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And it'll go back in equipment reserve.
Okay.
Okay. And then, being this is a lease return, we didn't have to do any competitive bid on this?
Well, there's a Sourcewell contract.
Oh, okay, so you're using a procurement contract.
Procurement contract.
Okay,
covers
all right.
the cost of it.
All right, so it's been bid.
Yeah. So.
All right, so we're legal.
Which is roughly a 30%
Just want to make sure we follow the law. We had a couple commissioners that didn't like to follow the law before, and I just want to make sure we follow the law.
Mr. Chairman, I can assure you that the 32-page Sourcewell contract pretty well covers your legal obligations.
Solid.
Yeah. Okay.
It's roughly a 30% discount versus if any one of us wanted to buy it directly.
Right. Yeah, you look
Pretty
at
good.
look at what we pay for vehicles, or even like heavy equipment. They have really got a government discount. Anyway, so if you don't have any other questions,
That's what that is. It's a lot of margin.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
They're still making money.
That's right.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the purchase of the mower tractor.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of a replacement tractor, 22-foot boom mower attachment under the government Sourcewell contract 110719.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want to go on record saying I think New Holland tractors are junk.
I can't hear you.
Say that again.
No, you don't want to say that again.
Not a New Holland.
Voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
All right, thank you. All right, the fencing.
Yes. So the second board action item today for your consideration is the fencing around the county shop property. Leavenworth County recently purchased property on the east side of Public Works shop property. As part of that purchase agreement, as I understand it, the county is expected to build a fence along the new property line. This project, for your consideration today, would suffice that agreement. Also included in this cost estimate, or this bid, we bid this item, is replacement of all of the fences, including the gate structures. The improvements along the roadway and the gate structures, from my understanding from talking with Mr. LOUGHRY, is eligible for our COVID response reimbursement funds or the KAAZ Act. We are going to take the gates and set them back away from the roadway. We will 45 them so you can pull currently when you pull off of the roadway, when you have a semi or large truck and trailer, your trailer is out in the roadway, so this would allow for the truck to pull fully off the roadway and still keep the property gated. Also within this is two intercom systems. So currently the county shop is remaining closed, and an individual calls in, but this would allow for intercoming. And it also allows for the second gate near the salt dome to be opened by a remote.
Okay.
So whether that remote is included, we could get duplicates of that remote, or if it was something that was opened and closed from within the building of the shop by the window, either way would work. But it does, currently that gate is non-motorized. We did get 4 bids. They did range in price from $88,401, which was Challenger Fence Company of Baser, Kansas. The high bid was Quality Fence LLC at $132,200. So there was a significant range.
Why do you think there's a $40,000 difference? I mean, they didn't leave something out, as near as you can tell.
I don't believe they did leave anything out because we had bids of $88,401, $96,972. We did communicate back and forth with the firm from Lansing, and they made it known up front prior to the bid process that they wouldn't be able to compete with some of the larger groups that maybe, I don't know what the reasoning was, if it was the bond or if it was the cost of the materials. Maybe they can't purchase it for the same discount price because of the volume that some of these larger fencing companies may be purchasing it. But they stated up front they were going to bid, but if some of these larger fencing companies came in,
So Challenger was a little bit then.
Yeah, Challenger was low bid with $88,401, of which we will itemize specifically what portion is the eligible for the KAAZ Act funding. Approximately $23,000 of that, conservatively, should be able to be submitted back towards that KAAZ Act funding.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll approve entertain a motion to approve the fence contract.
We'll make a motion to approve Public Works enter into a contract with Challenger Fence to replace existing fencing gates at Public Works location and fence the east property line of the recently acquired property in an amount not to exceed $88,401.87 with a 5% contingency for rock drilling.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
That fence along the road been there since 1962. I mean, we've updated the gates, of course.
We can get another 50 years. All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Everything going all right out the shop? Everybody staying healthy and everything?
Knock on wood.
Okay.
Currently, we were fully staffed.
Good.
Had some equipment breakdowns this week that has slowed some of the progress of chip and seal.
Yeah, it's all going to break down in the winter, chip spreaders. The chip spreader down or distributor?
One of each yesterday, or the chip spreader and one of the distributors yesterday. So I had a relay go out on the distributor, which was able to get repaired, and some of the gates on the chipper would not open. So as of the time of this meeting, they still weren't opening. And we were trying to get that hour to the shop to take a look at it. But our season's burning along quickly, and we need to get miles under us when we have dry weeks.
I think this year's just going to be one of them years, Bill. So
other projects are moving along fine. Have some different situations come up on every project, but the dust abatements are long.
I saw a good payment to AM Coron.
AM Coron.
Yeah,
That makes me believe that there's positive progress on the bridge.
There's progress on the bridge. Be reserved to say extremely positive. They are behind schedule. They have not worked Saturdays. I anticipate that today or tomorrow they are going to try to put in a request for additional working days because of the 3 flood events that overtopped their coffer dam. They took 34 days to drill their west footing in. Their initial schedule said that would take 12. They are revising their schedule and providing a new schedule for the project. I anticipate that it to be more accurate than their last schedule that they produced, and far more accurate than the first schedule that they produced. But I'm still optimistic that we will have that they will complete it on time. I anticipate denying the request, depending on the information that they provide based upon the weather. Weather is something that sometimes extensions of contracts are granted for, but in this case, they've only worked one Saturday throughout the project, and so they've missed, way more than the 4 or 5 working days that they've.
Is that? So stupid question, I guess, but how do we hold that contractor accountable? Is it you or somebody in your team's driving out on Saturday, or it's all self-reported?
Oh, we have a full-time inspection. So anytime they want to work, they have to notify the inspector by Thursday that they're going to work on.
Yeah, there's somebody there.
And I can tell you they haven't been there on Saturday.
Well, I was going to say, if Jeff's running down there. And
I've been there every day.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so by the end of
Both.
if they're going to work a Saturday, they need to notify the inspection firm by Thursday at the end of the day.
Okay.
And so King's Construction has worked one Saturday out there, and they've worked one Saturday for approximately 6 hours since the project has began. They've also not worked a lot of 12-hour days, which would be typical of a bridge crew. They've worked a lot of 9-hour days, and so I don't think that their critical path completion has gotten to a point where they can't meet the 12-3 deadline, but they are approaching a critical path to the 12-3 deadline. They really need to have Pier 2 poured by the end of next week. If they don't have Pier 2 poured by the end of next week, we'll be having a different conversation about whether or not it's realistic that they're going to.
They might be working 6/12s next week.
They need to be working 6/12s every day that it's dry.
Right.
Between now and completion of the project.
They haven't even started Pier 2. They can do that in a week.
They should be able to do it.
So regarding the weather, which is always a variable, but it's a known flood zone. Like, how do you even factor that in? I mean, the reality is, you can't say, we never anticipated a flood because it floods all the time.
But we had a lot of rain days, though, that would have not counted against
I get that.
days, too.
We have a calendar day, so we don't have a working day project, so they can't really subtract the days that they're not working. And so it's a number of calendar days.
Oh, this is a calendar day
It's
one?
a calendar day project, so it's not like a 120 working day project. So
And then there's penalties built in, right?
there's
Based on
$500 day penalty.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so they're looking at punitive damages. We would just withhold from their payment. But there are some critical things. Pier 2 needs poured. Asphalt needs laid. I would really like to see the new schedule that may come out today or tomorrow. Move that asphalt schedule up to mid to early October. There are ways to lay your asphalt while you're tying your deck steel and tie your concrete back into your asphalt. That I propose that they do, and not wait until all their concrete's into November to have a pavement schedule, because you're rolling the dice, anticipating good paving weather.
So it sounds like they might be making the job harder on themselves then.
Yeah, they have a lot of projects.
Sure.
So, like the project manager on this site is managing 6 bridges right now. So, we just need them to provide the staff.
Here's what it looked like yesterday.
Oh, gee. Well, that's not good. Yeah, they can get it later. I had one other question. On that subdivision on County Road 2, is that road open? Did we accept them roads yet?
Lexi Lane?
Yes.
Yes. So,
I see we got stop sign up, street sign, and
we're in
some people driving in and out there, so I didn't know if we've accepted it yet.
Well, we're in the process of, we have submitted Daniels Excavating a partial acceptance of the roadway. We've accepted the road, the asphalt, and the road base itself. The actual roadway was accepted as of Monday. At the end of the day, we accepted that. They have provided all the Terracon testing for the base and the asphalt and all the necessary stuff, and Olson has reviewed that, and it has been fully accepted. Now, because they built this to where it didn't coincide with any seeding season, they did put down a cash bond for 1.5 times their cost of their seeding for, I think, it was $9,000 in order to go ahead and pull building permits before they had grass growth. The issue in there lies, they have a SWIP, erosion control permit, and we're not going to assume the liability or the maintenance of that SWIP erosion control permit. So we accepted the asphalt roadway and excluded the ditch sections from that acceptance.
Okay, so the road is open, so it's the public can travel it, and we're okay.
Well, we're waiting on their maintenance bond. So they were So applying the letter that we provided them to their maintenance bond, the bonding company, the entity, and so when we have that back in place, then the road would be
Okay, so I didn't drive down, but the signage is all in place, so it's ready for the public to travel on, and we don't have to close it off or anything.
No, yeah, it's
Okay.
ready. Yeah.
Okay, because it looked like there's a lot of traffic going in and out of there. It could have been workers.
Well, they were already contacting our department, and I know they've contacted planning and zoning. They're wanting to pull building permits.
Oh,
like tomorrow. As soon as the maintenance bond's in place, they're
them expensive homes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Apparently, they've sold 18 of the 24.
Well, there was a lot of people driving in and out of
18
the
of the
street.
24?
That's what the
Are sold?
contractor said. Is 18 of the 24 lots are sold, and they were wanting to pull building permits on.
Maybe they had an
That's
open house.
fantastic. That's great.
I was concerned that it wasn't open and there's people driving in and out of there. And
We're trying to get out of their way. I mean, they've passed the new. They did all their testing on the roadway itself, the ditches. Just need to have some grass on it, and I think fall seeding season starts in 2.5 weeks, and so they'll fluff their dirt and drill their seed and get it in. As soon as they have 60% growth, then we can accept the ditches.
these are very expensive lots.
Yes.
They're very expensive.
I had a question about the Challenger fence motion.
Yes.
The 5% contingency for if they hit rock, drilling posts. Do we need to put that in the motion? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. That's making sure.
I think we're okay there, though. Dug a lot of stuff around there. I've never been wrong.
I didn't want to because I prefer contractors to do their own geological studies. But
Fence job? Oh, boy, that costs more than the fence job. But,
Get a Woodson
anyway,
stick.
hey,
Sorry
you
to
know how
take
much
all
we
your time,
hate
Bill.
change
That's all
orders.
right.
Hate change orders.
Change order.
Hey, change yours. Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully the folks in Iowa heard that loud and clear.
We hate change orders.
HR sent me the information on that employment well run out of Iowa.
Now we're AM co runs out of Iowa.
Hmm?
They make that up. Did the AM co run out of Iowa?
I don't think it's Iowa, but
I thought they were like Sioux.
somewhere north.
Okay.
I thought it was.
Oh, I didn't see your last
How do you like it? This is my election victory mask.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah.
That's great.
Tried to get him to vet me yesterday.
Chad, what?
He wouldn't vet me yesterday.
Bill, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Have a good one.
Okay, do we have any other
Thanks for all you
business
do,
before
Bill.
us?
Yeah, thank you.
Then we'll go on to our public comment. We have one public comment, Nancy Carpenter.
Morning, Nancy.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Nancy Carpenter, 14681 Kreider Road, Bonner Springs, Kansas. On July 8th, you listened to representatives from Kaw Valley and citizens from your county during a public hearing on an SUP for the Lenape Sand Quarry. On July 15th, you voted to grant that SUP. In doing so, you took Kaw Valley's word that there would be no independent sales on site, that fencing would be erected, that all permits were complete and approved, that Lenape Drainage District's concerns didn't matter, that the railroad crossing is adequate, that MSHA violations and tax delinquencies were trivial matters, that Leavenworth County would reap the rewards of jobs and property tax revenue. You heard what you wanted to hear, as it's all about having Leavenworth County to be open for business. Obviously, your decision is very disappointing to the citizens it will directly impact, but our voices didn't seem to matter. Now you've adopted a resolution granting Kaw Valley permission to dredge. I'm here to question what that resolution says. A citizen without any prior knowledge of the Lenape Sand Quarry should be able to read the resolution, look at the supporting documents that are specifically mentioned, and feel confident that the resolution paints a clear picture of the requirements placed on Kaw Valley. That is the role I'm going to assume. So let's take a look at just a couple pieces of the resolution that was approved according to the minutes of your July 15th, 2020 meeting. In my binder, I have the resolution and the supporting documents that were specifically mentioned. As of 8:30 this morning, the copy that the BOCC has been asked to sign has not been made public. Remember, I'm a citizen looking at this document with no prior history to influence my reading. as would be the case if someone a few years down the road needs to check if an activity by Kaw Valley is allowed under the SUP. What is the haul route that Kaw Valley drivers must follow? According to the staff report, the truck route includes the intersection at 158th and Golden Road, north along 158th Street, and east along Loring Road. Then again, condition number 20 says the SUP is limited to the narrative, which says trucks would be directed to the 166th Street, Golden Road, 189th Street, K32 Highway Quarry route. Sounds like either route is acceptable, as both can be found in the referenced documents. I wonder if I'll be able to send my contractor directly to the site to get sand. There's nothing in the conditions that say no. And look, in 2 different places in the narrative, under both traffic routes and expected traffic volumes and methods of operations, there is talk of trucks other than Kaw Valley trucks being loaded with sand at the site. But wait, didn't Kaw Valley representatives proclaim at the public hearing there would be no independent contractors allowed? Remember, those same representatives said Kaw Valley would follow the conditions, and the conditions don't say no. How about we check the hours of operation? The narrative and the noise study both say Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Would you look at that? Condition 14 says Monday through Saturday. No problem. Just follow the condition. And even better, the staff report allows for 24-hour operations during peak seasons, which means what exactly? I hope you see my point. This resolution has been around with slight modifications since at least July of 2019. Yet the very documents it references conflict with each other. Why is that? Why is there no mention of fencing, even though the Planning Commission on July 10, 2019 asked that a condition on fencing be added? Why does Condition 1 speak of impact fees when the Pleak letter and the staff report both say there are no impact fees? I could go on. Is this resolution meant to be a legal binding document? If so, why didn't the staff or this board read it with a more critical eye? Why must a citizen stand here and ask that you step back and fix the errors that are found throughout this resolution? Why indeed? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If there's no other public comment, we have any other business, and a motion to adjourn.
I have one thing.
Okay.
I think we need to revisit exactly what our idea of the Kaw Valley Road improvement should be or is in the contract. I don't think there was adequate studies done, even by Olson, as far as what road needs to be constructed. I think we're still
future road type.
Yeah, future road, and also the existing road. I don't think was adequately addressed. I've got evidence. I've got evidence that the base on that road was super overbuilt because of the Lake Rock Quarry in the 70s. So Loring Rock Quarry. So I think there needs to be some more
on Loring itself.
Core samples done to see what's there instead of tearing down what's there without any consideration of what's already there. I think we're still at somewhere between the Super 2 and what's existing. And along with that, I think there's still some issues with the funding of that. I think with load fees, something else needs to take into consideration, or what are we doing with the other quarries? There's 5 other rock quarries operating. What are we getting out of those rock quarries for the road TIF and RIFs, road maintenance, damage, etc.? So somehow we got to come to
So are you saying to change the SUP that was approved at the meeting?
I'm not sure changing it. I'm not sure if what we talked about as far as the road was gray enough to say what kind of road needs to be built specifically.
Well, I think it was very specific that it was a rebuild to standards that the county
AASHTO standards. It's AASHTO standard road right now.
Well, and it was a recommendation of the staff that it be completely rebuilt, and that was what was in the resolution that was approved by this board.
But rebuilt to what standard is what I'm talking about.
And that question was asked at the meeting, and that was the answer.
Okay. I guess I'm asking for a work session to to readdress that.
Well, I guess I assumed there was going to be one anyway relative to
On the
agreement creation.
Development agreement?
Yeah.
That's where I was at. I thought we were leaving it gray enough or open enough to discuss further.
The two things. One, there has to be a development agreement. That's what was directed. There's been little or no progress towards a development agreement yet. There's been some discussions.
That's what I'm talking about, the development.
The construction of the road will not be something that we, as a group, sit down and decide what's best. That's why we hire a professional firm to go out and actually do the design work according to the traffic that's proposed, which I do think has been redressed. We've already resolved that during the public hearing and subsequent to that, the approval of the resolution. That the applicant may not like that doesn't mean that we have to reopen that. But if we do reopen it, I think you, and I'll let David weigh in on that, I think you run the risk of reopening the entire thing.
Okay. So who is working on the development agreement?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, if I could provide you a brief update on that. Mr. LOUGHRY and I did via telephone meet with the applicant's attorney and representative last week. We have requested that they provide to us a proposed development agreement for the county to begin that review process. We have not received that yet. The applicant did ask for specifications as to what standards the road would need to be improved to, and Mr. Knoll has prepared a document that basically lays out AASHTO standards. Commissioner Culbertson, you raised good points. There will need to be, and it's contemplated that there will be additional testing on that road to bring it to the county's standards, to the county's satisfaction, and that will be detailed further in the development agreement. It is contemplated, at least right now, by myself and Mr. LOUGHRY, that the county will be the party that reviews the road design, approves the design, and oversees the construction of the road, with the applicant providing funding and in reference to the assurance of the county. There are a great number of details that need to be worked out through that development agreement. The purpose is not to penalize the applicant nor to penalize the taxpayer by not having the applicant bear the cost of the necessary road improvements. If there's adequate base, it's not contemplated that we would tear out the existing base and have them put in new base. Those are details that we anticipate will be worked out through the development agreement, the beginning of the negotiation of which we have just begun.
And an engineer will say what's needed, correct?
Your engineers will be the driving force, if you want to use that phrase.
Okay. So we will use Olson to determine this?
We anticipate using Olson. We anticipate that there will be the need for additional studies on the road. Those will be undertaken and supervised by Olson. In essence, this is going to be a county road project that is funded by the applicant. We will, of course, keep the applicant apprised of the progress on that, but the applicant is not going to be the deciding party on how that road will be improved. This board will be. And Commissioner Shimke, you are correct. The development agreement certainly has to be presented to this board for consideration. Once we get right now it's rather amorphous. Once we get a clear picture of the actual terms of the development agreement, we will be bringing that to you, and a work session might be appropriate.
So the development agreement is being drafted by the applicant. We're then going to review and obviously have concerns and also recommendations to be included in that, and that can be the work session.
Yeah, and Commissioner Shimke, the reason I've requested that the applicants send us a proposed development agreement is the applicant is represented by a internationally operating law firm with several thousand attorneys, and they've acknowledged they have had similar projects in the past. So in order to move this forward and without having to reinvent the wheel, what I've asked them is, you've done this before, send me a proposed agreement and we'll start from there.
But I was going to go to your point, Jeff. So let's say, again, the county's taken the position on, based on our consultants, what the road standard should be. if the applicant wanted to take on additional expense and additional testing and try to prove out some other methodology relative to the base that exists from the Loring Quarry 49 years ago, I think they totally could. Whether or not you can ever get our consultants to agree, it's probably like lawyers. Sometimes they can.
And Commissioner Shimke, being a lawyer, I'll take that as a compliment,
I totally meant that way.
whether it was intended or not. We're going to move forward on this with due consideration and certainly keeping you apprised. I would suggest that the applicant has an incentive to not overly lawyer this out, because until that development agreement is in place, they don't start off any operation.
Yeah, it's a moot point. And per some of the feedback we've received, even public comment this afternoon, it's not afternoon yet, still this morning, I'm assuming we can address any of those caveats in that development agreement. If we have concerns relative to, private trucks versus, or even, again, clarifying hours of operation. The challenge is we've got how many pages of documentation and iterations, and I get the frustration from residents. I do. It's unfortunate that we don't have hundreds of members of our planning and zoning department or hundreds of lawyers that could help catch those things. We could totally staff up for that. I don't think they'd want to see what their property taxes would be.
Well, some of that reference is not accurate either. You look at documents that are 2 years old that we're not even using anymore, and you say, "Oh, that's in conflict with what we're saying today."
It's version
it
control
is.
and a number of other things. I realize.
That's what I was going to say. Is I'm pretty sure they're comparing things that aren't included anymore.
Did the copy of the resolution, is it not available?
Should be.
It should be on.
I'll make sure it gets put online. We were waiting.
We have all the
signatures by the
signatures
commissioners.
now, so it should be available.
I think you saw it out on the table
It's
waiting.
not all signed yet?
No, I think it's all signed.
Commissioners have all signed it?
Yeah, there's only one left, and that was taken care of last week, so it should be available.
Okay.
Well, I'll visit and make sure it's put online by planning and zoning. Commissioner Shimke, I can assure you that the development agreement will be done to our best abilities. I'd just comment that anyone who wishes to find uncertainty in a document will certainly find it.
Oh, I understand.
Okay.
And that's all I wanted to bring up.
So
Was if we're going to
basically,
talk about the
to
development
satisfy
agreement.
your concerns, if we get a development agreement, we will have a work session on that development agreement.
Yep.
Everybody good with that? Okay.
I don't know if we're at that point yet. I was just going to add that I don't hope everybody saw the email of the recap from the fire board.
Yes, sir.
District 1 meeting on Monday. Mark helped me to follow back up and make sure that they had all of the relative documentations to the CARES funding. I know they're working diligently towards any and all expenses that have either been recognized or expected expenses relative to the pandemic. I would really like to see if it exists. If it doesn't exist, as those requests are coming in, I don't know, Mark, how we're really tracking, those requests, but in my mind, it should be, Leavenworth County and then every other entity relative to how those funds are being requested and hopefully allocated. Point with that being is if it doesn't exist in a singular place, I could easily see Baser making requests that Lansing doesn't, or the Sheriff's Department making a request, which is Leavenworth County, that Fire District 1 or, local municipality police departments don't. Just because, again, I want all great ideas shared, right? Because if, one is smarter than another one as far as what qualifies, why wouldn't we want every one of them to leverage it? And so having kind of a centralized location for that stuff, I think, would make sense to maximize our ability to.
Well, the requests that come in from the cities or the school districts will be unique to them because it's their money that we've allocated to them. The money that's coming in to utilize the other taxing entities and those things, those will be, they will have to be reviewed before they're approved.
I got you. I
But like
see
the
this turning into a
city,
situation where Baser School District has a really great idea, and none of the other school districts do the same thing because they didn't
think
have
of
that
it.
great idea.
But that
Because
doesn't-
I know it'll shock everybody, but our municipalities and our schools and everybody else don't communicate as great team players oftentimes.
but that doesn't impact the money that they're going to spend, the amount of money.
If they can't come up with things to spend
They've
on,
already
they
come
think-
up with the things, or they wouldn't have it allocated to them. they've already come up with their list of things they're going to spend it on, I guess. So the school districts are different than say a township or something like that, because the school districts have a specific amount allocated per school district based on enrollment. So the school district here in Leavenworth may say, we need $200,000 to upgrade our facilities, and we need $500,000 to do something else, whereas maybe Lansing says we need $600,000 to upgrade our facilities because their facilities are in different, but they've already allocated all of their funds.
Okay, so you're telling me every taxing entity was creative enough to meet the numbers that were allocated?
Yes, the cities and the school districts that have a specific amount allocated to them, yes, they have already come up with the exception I haven't heard from one school district, but they all know that tomorrow is actually their deadline. But that was their challenge before August 6th to come up with a plan on how they were going to spend. I haven't seen any of them have any trouble coming up with the process.
Because I've been hearing people because of the sums of money and how little time you had to turn around the request.
Easton City is?
No, the schools and the cities that are specifically had amounts allocated to Easton's and the other taxing it.
They're the other.
So, but those are, what's that?
What's their deadline? Easton?
Yeah.
Well, that deadline is not until, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's like the end of October.
When you need to hear from them is October.
By then, we need to have those funds all allocated out.
Okay, and I think what Chad's saying is, can we share the list that people are turning in with other entities?
And what I'm saying is it will have to be approved. That's something that will come to this board on a regular basis for approval because it's CARES Act funding. Okay. So their request will come in. Before we write a check to them, that request will have to be approved by the board.
You want to share to other people so they know what other entities are doing.
Yeah, for instance, Easton City would love to see what the other cities are turning in so they know what they can get reimbursed for.
Yeah.
And to your point is, everybody might be really great at submitting funds requests, but they don't qualify because they didn't spend enough time or put forth best practices. I'm just trying to share there's no way that collectively everybody wouldn't be way smarter than trying to do it in their own silos, because it's great that you can request $2 million. If only $500,000 of it is acceptable, then you just wasted a lot of time and energy. But this entity over here requested $2 million, and theirs was spot on because, I don't know, Jack McGaha sits on their board. I mean, I don't know. I'm throwing that out there.
That's what I'm saying is all those will be approved by this board, so it will be very public. Anybody will have access to it. I guess that's my point.
In arrears, it's worthless.
It's not in arrears, though. I mean,
we want the cities to know what the other cities are asking for before their deadline.
So if it was posted on a website or something.
Which I guess is tomorrow.
No, that's for schools.
Schools and the big four cities, the four that have got specific funds allocated.
But the others are October.
Yeah, they have until the end of October, I believe. I'd have to look at that. But
the townships and
the townships and the smaller communities. Yeah. So it's there.
I want the community to leverage the creativity and not expect each one of them to be as creative as the other, because they're not.
But I'm saying it will be there. That it has to come to this board for approval. So the big cities and the school districts on the 5th, not the 15th, that's the deadline, but the next Wednesday, you will have their spend plans in front of you for consideration because you have to approve it. Then the other cities or municipalities or townships, whatever, have all that information. It's going to be in our packet next week.
I'm doing a horrible job explaining this. Mark, you're a city. David, you're a city. You both submit to me by the deadline. It then comes in front of me, and now it's all out there, but your submittal sucks, and David's is good. And so David gets fully funded. You only get 25% funded because you didn't follow directions very well. And then you're out. By that standard, you'd be out, right? Or do you get to resubmit again?
No, you can. They've all been in contact before then saying, does this meet? They all have the same guidelines. There's only one.
Have they contacted each other and said, hey, we're turning this in, are you?
Yeah, so the cities, I'm sure, have been in contact with each other. I know the school districts have, but if they haven't, they haven't. But they've all submitted their spend plans that would meet the requirements. And there's only one, I think, that was at issue, and somebody was proposing to buy a drone, and I told them that's not going to probably meet the requirements. Now, these smaller ones, we don't have those applications, and we can't give them money until after September 15th anyways. So that's what I'm saying is the bigger ones are going to be in next week for you to approve. they are, I don't want to say generic, but they're generic enough that there's, again, the only one that I've seen that causes any concern is that they specifically called out they wanted to buy a drone.
So, but based on your review of what's been submitted or what you're expecting in the back and forth, you would expect that everything that's being submitted would qualify. Then my second question to that is, if you're thinking that, then I'm guessing this board would think that as well. My second question is, I sit here and again, you both submitted, but your submittal was way better. Maybe we got the same funds, but I asked for 3 things that probably aren't nearly as useful as what you requested, because somebody on your school board works at Garmin. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying.
They can repurpose it. So most of them, I think that maybe there's some confusion that the expenditures are not like a line item detail of every dime they're going to spend. It's, we're going to use 35% of these funds to improve our buildings, to make them COVID ready. We're going to spend
without detail.
Yeah, without the detail. They may say some of the items they're going to spend, but that's all they have to come up with. Then when the expenditures come in, one at a time, they have to be reviewed to make sure that they meet the guidelines. So, like they say, we're going to improve our buildings, we're going to set 35%.
So I'm going to use 25% to improve my sewer?
That would not meet the expectation. Okay. Right. But, like I said, so they may say, we're going to improve our buildings, we're going to put 35% aside for our building, but then they submit a request to us that says, we want to put in a new sewer line. Well, no, we would say that request doesn't. Then they just go find another. But all those will have to be reviewed and approved beforehand. So next week you will have on your agenda all of their spend plans, which then we have to submit on the 17th. I think they gave us since the 15th of the weekend. But
well, I thought I knew where Chad was going with that, but maybe not. I guess my question then is, how can I relay to a smaller city a list of what other cities are claiming so that they know what they can claim?
What's an allowable expense?
What they can submit.
So
before it gets to us, how can we do that?
There's a big frequently asked question that the state puts out. There's a frequently asked question that the federal government put out. We've put out some of our own guidelines. All those were sent out to the townships, to the taxing entities. So if they have those questions, they can email me and I'll send them whatever I have. If I have something from another city, I would say that really it's not.
But you don't really have the breakdown of the line items you got, just in general.
No, that's going to be as they come across them.
And I get
we have
what
some.
you're saying. Hey,
I mean, the city of Leavenworth has a really good plan, very detailed, and that will be in your agenda next week, assuming they don't change it between now and tomorrow. Right. But that's a really detailed.
It'd be a great guideline for a smaller city to look at.
Some of the other cities are not nearly as detailed, and so, but that doesn't mean they don't meet the requirement. The requirement basically is, you need to tell us that you have a plan to spend your full allotment of money, or we're going to reallocate it to someone who.
And I realize it's in the reading, and we've given guidance, and there's more forms than anybody could possibly get through in time provided by the state. I was just suggesting to Jeff's point, if Leavenworth already has a killer plan, gift that to everybody so that if theirs isn't as good, they can adopt it. Because I'm not convinced that you can have 15 taxing entities all come up with brilliant plans, given the time frames. I mean, I don't think that's fair. But again, if Baser comes up with something really great, if I'm in Tonganoxie or if I'm in Lansing, why wouldn't I want to say that's exactly what we should do? It's better than what we talk about because we only meet once a month. Right. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Did you say you've already mailed that out to Linwood and Easton?
I sent it out to all the contact lists that we have. I mean, I don't know who specifically, but yes, I think Linwood got it directly in Easton.
I think did not. The smaller cities need to be communicated with.
And that's all I'm saying is we're going to have, me and you are going to have to handle it.
They got a council meeting
Leavenworth
next
City's
week,
plan.
right?
Yeah, and then I can talk to.
Yeah, it sounds like, from what Mark's saying.
And I'm not trying to put all this on you, but you're inadvertently a single point of failure in this deal.
Well,
or success.
I guess that all the information is out there. It will be out there, and it's.
I want to help as much as we can. So that's the difference between the two. You're saying, hey, it's all self-service. It's all out there. Figure it out. And I'm saying, if somebody's figured it out, I'm ready to beat the system. I want to help them accelerate this thing because it's rigged against us. The system the state put out is bullshit.
But
it's rigged against us.
That's where our policies, I think, have come in to help cover these smaller entities that don't have the resources. But every item that comes in, when somebody makes a request on what they're going to spend their money on, if you want me to email it out to every other city and community or anybody who's eligible, that's fine. I think that does more to confuse them, but that's fine. But it doesn't keep them from getting their money. And we're not trying to be disruptive, but we're also we don't have the capacity to do it for them.
And I got your point. If it doesn't stop them from getting the funding, provided they put in an adequate request, fingers crossed, great. If we had even a page on our website that was a CARES tab and those plans were just links and a city could go and look at what Leavenworth submitted or what Baser submitted, then maybe that's enough. Again, at least that's not, hey, go read through 22 websites, including the 10 attachments that I sent you. It's, well, here's what Leavenworth's doing, and here's what Lansing's doing, or here's what Baser's doing.
I mean,
maybe you want to emulate that. Maybe you don't. I don't care, but at least I'm helping you.
And let me make it simple for you, Mark. Easton City was going to ask for nothing.
Oh, no.
Nothing. They didn't even know, even after I explained to them what this was, they thought, well, we can't ask for any money. So that's where we're at. We're trying to make it easier for them to understand you need to get reimbursed for something.
And I'm coming from the Fire District 1 meeting going, based on what their understanding was, I feel like they're asking for an inch when they could ask for a mile. Like, I'm assuming that they're already collaborating with Jamie Miller and Chuck McGaha and anybody and everybody that would fall into the first responder safety services of Leavenworth County and saying, well, here's all the things that we're doing. Why wouldn't you have a temperature walkthrough, whatever, at your facility? Like, I'm trying to help you because you don't maybe have 100 people in your department to think about this stuff. So,
City of Easton has 4th of July celebration. They make $20,000 off their concession stands. They didn't open that this year because of COVID-19.
That's not an eligible reimbursement.
Right,
They're
that's
taxing
income
entity.
replacement.
You can't replace your income with this money. They are a taxing entity. They cannot replace their income with these funds.
But what are 5 things that Easton spends $4,000 on that they cannot donate? So what other? I don't care if it's the American Legion. What is it? It's like, hey, they usually give $4,000 to this entity, but they can't give $4,000 to them this year because they didn't have their fireworks stand. How's that? We've talked about whether it's a CASA or a Family Against Violence or Alliance, museums. So there are ways where the same 20,000 could get covered. It's not income loss; it's who they can't support.
Yeah, I'm not talking about selling fireworks. I'm talking about the fireworks show.
They sell tickets to the fireworks show.
No,
concessions.
They open a concession.
Well, concessions. That's lost revenue. They can't use it to replace lost revenue.
I thought that was
in the museums, but not in the city because they're a taxing entity.
Are
non-profit
library boards and the recreation commissions, are they considered like the townships?
They would have to go talk to their cities for those.
So they would go underneath the
city.
Even though the libraries, technically, they're kind of their own thing.
We get to pay for it out in the county.
They would go to the cities to ask.
Okay.
I heard a door.
Somebody's getting ready to drive.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what they need help with, to figure out what's covered and what's
I think
not.
the little towns.
When's their next city council meeting?
Their first Monday, they just had one.
Just had one? Okay.
So it'll be a month.
We have a little time.
All right, and Baser's will be next week.
You think it's the end of October or beginning of October?
It's towards the end of October because by November 20th we have to have everything in or we have to give it back.
They'll have 2 more meetings before
Do we
that.
have any feeling? Are any of these? Do we feel like the guidelines are still changing or the dates are still changing? Because on the PPP it changed hourly.
The guidelines are changing. So 2 weeks ago they said you can't reimburse revenue for nonprofits. Nonprofits are not eligible. And then this week they put out, like on Monday, they put out a guidance that says, wait, nonprofits now are eligible.
See, they forgot how many senators sat on nonprofit boards.
And 3 weeks ago, nonprofits, the federal government said nonprofits were eligible. So it's changing every day. The new relief funds that they're talking about, the federal government is talking about changing the guidelines for the money we already have, stating that the states can't put additional restrictions on local municipalities on how they spend the money, which the state is doing. But so the federal government's finally saying, hey, 1, you have to distribute the money, and 2, you can't make them follow rules that we didn't put into play. And now they're talking about allowing up to a 25%. You could use up to 25% of those funds to reimburse lost revenue. So, yeah, the rules are changing. And they will continue to change. Oh, and the other thing they're talking about is maybe you have until the end of their next budget cycle. So we may get an additional 90 days to spend the funds. It may not have to be done by December 31st.
Right, that's what I
But
was
the state's telling us by the first part of December we have to send the money back. So it wouldn't matter.
If it goes to the runner, we already have the money.
Yeah, well, that's where, so yes, the guidelines are changing weekly, not daily maybe, but weekly. And I want to help all these entities as much as we possibly can. And I've been answering questions for the last 2 months for anybody who's asked them to the best of my ability. But I'm not an expert on it. I've just taken the time, because it's a significant amount of money, I've taken the time to research what I can, to read the CARES Act, to read the state guidelines, to set in on numerous webinars, which are, by the way, are open to everybody in the state. Some of them have 400 some people sitting in on them.
Right.
So there's not 400 counties. So obviously, all of these entities have those same abilities. Chuck McGaha, Emergency Management Director, he sets in on a lot of those too, because he wants to know what the rules are. If you are not motivated to educate yourself to get free money, I can't motivate you. If you have questions, I am happy to help you, but I can't. If you're not motivated to get this free money in some way, shape, or form, you have to take some of the responsibility on yourself. Yeah, you do. I'll do whatever I can. If you want to put that stuff out there, I'll put it out there, and that's not a problem. We have it. It has to be approved anyways. I'm just saying, we can only do so much. They are going to have to take the time to read the guidance that's out there, to look at what other people are doing, to set in on some of these webinars when the state has them, because they answer a lot of these questions directly. And it does change. So last week they dropped the bomb on us that we're not supposed to provide any funding until September 15th when they approve our spending plan. So now we have 30 days basically to get the money distributed or allocated.
I realize it's become a very, kill or be killed, and I understand that the state does absolutely, in my opinion, very little in the way of interacting with us and educating us and helping us. I don't want to be the same for the city. I mean, there are cities that have less people than our planning and zoning department, so I want to be a resource. They don't have the same kind of.
This is Commissioner. I've listened in on several of the webinars that have taken place, and they do provide a lot of information. One of the things that I would want to point out is that as they make different changes, the municipalities and the smaller governing bodies, they can adjust their plans as well, even from what they have submitted to us, as long as they fit within the guidelines.
Okay.
I don't disagree. I'll just close with this. I don't want to be like, at the end of it, oh, wow, we didn't think of you, or oh, wow, I can't believe you didn't ask us, or oh, wow, how'd you not? I mean, some of these folks, they meet once a month, and they've got full-time jobs, and so they're not up to speed on what we're spending countless hours every day, every week doing. So if we can put it out there or make it available make it easier. Again, if Leavenworth has one of the most comprehensive, and again, by resources and people, they should. Then great, let's put it out there and make sure that we drive as many of our folks to it in the county that are taxing entities to say, hey, here's what Leavenworth's done. If you haven't looked at it, you should. Maybe you can improve your plan or amend your plan.
That's correct, Chad, but the thing is they have to reach out to ask the question or to even look on the website to see if the information is there. So how do we get the information to them that it's available if they're not reaching out to find out what's available?
I agree, and that's the whole argument between being proactive versus reactive. So I'm trying to be proactive. To Jeff's point, Easton was going to ask for nothing. Now Jeff's trying to help make sure Easton asks for what they can and should qualify for. So I'm just trying to make sure no one's left out, not by intent, but because they didn't think to ask.
I completely agree. I just think that, to some extent, as Mark said, we all have to accept some level of responsibility. I think that, if we had on there are, we weekly update via the state of Kansas, somebody has to even look to know that the Q&A exists. They have to know that the online conference call, exists. But somebody has to reach out to make that known, or to us or to our offices. You happenstanced upon the meeting, which was a great thing because then you were able to share that information. But and I think that the other commissioners, when they attend different meetings, if the questions come up, they are giving that guidance. But how do we reach out to those taxing entities that are smaller if we send an email and there's no response? Then what is the answer?
Okay. Mr. Van Perry?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd like to just add a comment, more or less a warning. Right now, the federal government, I'll use an analogy, there's a fire and they're pouring water, i.e. money, on it. Right now, they're not really concerned about how many drops each fire gets. That day will, however, come. I'm going to urge this board to be cautious in approving expenditures that are not clearly within the guidelines, whatever they may be at the time, with respect to requests that are made, because ultimately the money is going to go from the federal government to the state to this body. You will then allocate it outwards. My understanding of the eventual responsibility is, though, if at some point in the future an audit finds that a school district improperly requested and obtained funds, the first person they're going to ask for the refund of that money is you, but kindly give you the opportunity to go back to the entity to try to collect from them. So, I have not attended these webinars or participated in it. I know Commissioner KAAZ and Mark have. I don't really care to, because I believe it's very frustrating to listen to contradictory information and ever-changing guidelines. But it's not going to get better. But I would urge you that when you're considering these expenditures, that you should err on the side of caution. A requesting party may really believe that their request is justified, but if you have any questions, the ultimate responsibility is going to eventually fall back on this board. So you're going to have to be the policeman, because, again, you will be the party that would be looked to refund any expense that is deemed improper use of those funds. And I have to forewarn you, as Mark said, the guidelines change. I know that in some of these webinars, completely contradictory information has been given, not just for the week, the prior webinar, but even within the webinar that's going on. So it's going to be difficult, but...
I'm tracking. Quick question. I know we're getting close to lunch, and Mike's getting hangry and all those things.
You dragged me into this.
When you think about money collection, though, so let's say it's going back to the feds, and then the state is coming to the county and saying, hey, county, X, Y, and Z dollars need to be returned. Well, I think we're pretty much of the impression that it's only going to the state. I mean, it's never going to go back to the federal government.
Right.
So the state will stockpile whatever they can and amend whatever rules to benefit their position. I totally get all that. But let's just pick on city X, and let's say they misappropriate $50,000 or $100,000 or some amount of money that we can't prove was appropriately allocated, and we're saying, hey, give it to us, and they go, we ain't got it. Okay, well, I'm the collection mechanism for the county, so at some point money's going to flow through me that ultimately goes to you. And I'd argue the same thing to the state, because the state pisses me off, because ultimately I'm the collection agent for you, and then it flows back to the state. So it's a quid pro quo type situation for me when you think about how the money flows. So I guess saying, we're playing a game that is impossible to win or forecast relative to the rules. But as a money collection agency, between whether it flows through to the state or whether it flows through to a municipality, there's some amount of protection in that, is there not? I mean, they're the ones that made it in error, but if I'm held responsible for it, I can correct it one way or another. I mean, it would seem.
Unfortunately for us, and maybe it's unfortunately for us that the state doesn't have the same requirement, that if we fail to pass through funds that we've collected for another entity, it's a crime, like a crime. You can go to jail for it.
Right.
So the state doesn't have that same thing. If they fail to pass through funds that were collected specifically for us, that's too bad for us. If our treasurer, per se, or clerk fails to pass through funds to another entity, it's a crime. So that's why we don't have that luxury of just holding the funds back. We would have to go and ask them. But that's also why we put in the process that we did. We aren't going to issue any of these funds unless it's agreed that these funds meet the requirements that are in place at the time. So I'm 100% confident that we will do a good job of that and that we won't have to go back and ask for the funds back because we will be using the guidance that's in place at that time.
At the time, right? I'm just caveat there is always at the time. So at the time we can feel great. A month from now it could be, oops.
Well, it sounds like maybe the federal government is trying to alleviate some of the hoops that the state has put upon the local municipalities, which would be really good if they do that. However, it doesn't seem like they're able to move very forward in getting that approved. They're stuck on a few items, so I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But I think that the thought process is, and you said it earlier, Commissioner, that we have the money. We're going to do everything we can to make sure it's used at the local level for what it was designed and purposed for. Our intention is not to send it back to the state so they can use it in some other place.
Correct.
So.
Okay.
This is Commissioner KAAZ, and I would hope that by the time the state has put all the ever-changing, that by the time they have approved our plan, we won't be dealing with the moving target any longer. It will be set, and we will pretty much know what we can and can't expense with and on. And as Mark said, one of the reasons that the committee did the reimbursement aspect of the funds was so that we can very carefully monitor what the expenses are.
Okay.
I think that's great. I hope it does stay static and isn't like tax guidelines and the IRS and everything else.
Well, there's a meeting this week, isn't there? Another phone meeting?
Yeah, there's one right now, actually.
Okay.
And and then there's one Friday. There's two a week.
Right.
2 a week. So
and changes.
And the group that they have in charge has never done anything like this before.
Nobody has. Usually when they put a program like this out, they provide training.
But they also don't. I mean, they have no idea what it takes, what a municipal budget looks like or what expenditures look like. And like I said, they've told us now that we can't even use the funds until they approve our spending plan, which does make somewhat sense, but they have until September 15th to do that now. Okay. So now they've narrowed our time for our window another 30 days.
And that could change the next meeting.
Yeah.
So, it is a movie.
They are definitely a very young, and I don't mean to be critical, not hugely experienced group of people that are overseeing this.
I think it's laughable, but that's just my 2 cents.
You got some expensive jobs.
It's laughable, but they got a lot of cash.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anything else? And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That was hard.